folks. Okay, I'm going to put this link for people on YouTube. Whoa. Just Dojo. Cool. Glad to hear, Drummond. Cool. Okay, so we just had an accident moments ago where one of my kids fell down like 15 stairs, so I have to go deal with the kids for a little bit longer than I had intended to here to get this tournament started. The tournament's supposed to start on the hour at 8 o'clock, and it will. And my commentary will start as soon as I can. Excellent, yo. Yeah, I'm also hoping they're okay. It's kind of... Anyway, so here's the info. Quoi? Qu'est-ce qu'elle a fait? Qu'est-ce que papa a fait? Elle t'a léché ou elle t'a mangé? Qu'est-ce que tu fais, Pops? Elle est complètement folle, hein? Cinglée. Doucement. Elle a fait encore une fois? Oh mon Dieu. Unrated Grandmaster. Okay, cool. All right, folks. So, join the tournaments if you feel like it. And let other people know as they come in the next 10 or 15 minutes to join the tournaments. The wrong links are going to be in Moobot right now. Shoot. Okay. Put the links in. Fight. So we want to put in... Okay. 1600 plus section is 9030. Under 1600 section is 45 plus 30, and then a link to that one. Un moment, ma chérie, oui. Un moment. And then turn it on. Now let's see if it works. Uppy. Okay, up. Okay. Those look right. Okay. Hopefully I'll be back really soon. Let me see.
You see what? Gently. Pull it gently. Okay, you gotta go over again. Is that a yes or a no?
It's up to you.
Oh, I mean,
whatever you want to do.
If she's still awake, then it seems like I could be of help.
Yeah.
And Alicia's mom's not expecting Alicia till 9, so you can do it.
Okay. Sure. Sounds good.
You can after I put Sal to sleep.
Right.
While I do. It's up to you. Anyway.
Okay.
You're at home though?
We're at home. Zal, I just put her in bed, but she's not happy about it.
You want to hold her then, and I'll be whatever,
yeah.
10 minutes away?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you soon.
Okay, bye. All right, folks. Congratulations. It looks like the tournaments successfully got off the ground without me, so well done, bravo. It looks like I need a few more minutes here. But hopefully we'll be able to come provide some commentary pretty soon. In the meantime, I'll leave you with this excellent matchup here between Small Beak and Steve Nash's 20-minute workout. And yeah, that's all there is to say. I look forward to covering these interesting games in a few minutes when I can. So let me see. Is the information here clear enough to join Fight on Twitch? That commentary will start when I've dealt with kids. Yeah, that's clear enough, I guess. Oh, and the title of the show is Friday Night Fights. Sorry, it was not supposed to be this crazy today. Yeah, we got a Richter Rouser kind of game going on here. All right, everybody. Yeah, I can't wait. See you soon. Holy moly. Looks like I only missed a move. Oh, Far Eastern. Do you need some help finding the tournament? Do you need some help? You type !fight in the Twitch chat, and then you click on the link. Or for anyone over on YouTube, you can maneuver through this link here, which I left in the info, and then you click on the proper section, either under 1600 or 1600 plus. And then you just click on the game. We've got a great matchup here between Alex J. Gustafsson and Prabhav Agarwal as well. Prabhav was coming in from YouTube and doing a very nice job of encouraging others to join the tournament with them. So I appreciate that, especially tonight. That was very much needed. We're going to open up some more games. We've got the Aton of chess, Aton, if I remember correctly. A ton of chess, right? Kind of like a joke on a ton, like a lot of chess, a ton of chess, a ton of chess, versus Everest Knight, Gil Johnson. Excellent. Constructor against returning Alyssa Mint Chip. Wow, a lot of people managed to get back on the horse the moment these tournaments came back. Falgreave's back. Wow, we've got a great turnout. Given, I guess watching the World Championship has whet some other people's appetite for playing. Yeah. Oh, the browser links don't work because you play on a phone, right? Huh? Crazy. I don't know how people do that. But apparently, half of the people on chess.com play via phone. Okay, so let's see. Of all these positions, which one was the most appetizing? I'm a little afraid to comment on Prabhav's game because I see Prabhav chatting in YouTube. Prabhav, if you can hear me, can you silence the stream so you don't hear what I say? And you can just focus on your game here. Because I don't want to tell you, that white's going to play queen takes queen takes d5, and then black has to play king d7, and then, it'll mess with your game. All right. Thanks, buddy. What you can do later is go back and watch the VOD and compare what I say with what you were thinking. That can be super helpful. All right, so Prabhav's getting into some tactics here with Alex J. Gustafsson. So the move was rook b8, attacking this pawn. Gustafsson thought about it for a while and then defended the pawn with a3. And now Prabhav captures on c5 with the undeveloped bishop, so it's nice to get that piece out. And the concept is that against pawn takes bishop, there would be rook takes b2, recovering the piece. So Prabhav is trying to win a pawn with this bishop takes c5, as well as develop. Now, I think white was up a pawn before, so I think this is recovering a pawn sacrifice, right? White's playing, this opening. This is going to be an advanced Caro-Kann. And white's holding on to this extra pawn, and Prabhav is going to fight to try and get it back. Queen c7 hitting e5, bishop b2 defending e5, rook b8 attacking a pawn, and bishop takes c5, seemingly recovering the pawn sack. So that's nice for Prabhav. All right. Lots of stuff going on here. Noisy phone. Okay. Thank you, Cartier. I'm now starting to be excited about it. For like 10 plus hours, I was in some weird dreamlike state. I couldn't process it. And the blunder was like a bad taste in my mouth. You know, I wanted him to win the world championship with a brilliant move. Is that too much to ask? Should I be like happy for him to get it any which way? You know, grinding every day. I mean, I approve of people who grind for a long time, you know, and play a lot of moves. But that blunder was so shocking, so sudden, so unexpected, and so distasteful, honestly, that it was maybe 12 hours before I finally had a taste of happiness about Gukesh's victory. It took a while. Perhaps also just because of how disoriented I was from not sleeping properly for weeks. Okay, so do we see any refutation for Gustafsson here of this tactic? Like any fancy move for white to stay ahead a pawn, right? So we have to look for undefended spots in black's camp and see if there are any tactics to make use of it. You see what I mean? Like if you could move your queen to e2, for example, and attack the pawn and defend your bishop at once, then black, if they saved the bishop, you might get the pawn, and if they defended the pawn, you might get the bishop. But here the c2 pawn interferes with that, so it's not a proper refutation. But that's the kind of thing that you want to look for, folks, if you're ever in this situation, one of these sort of tactical situations. You're looking at things like, can I move my bishop and make a threat, right? So bishop e5 attacking the queen, and then you'll take the bishop next move. You're looking at, can I move my queen and attack g7 while defending my bishop, or attack a6 while defending my bishop, right? Those are the kind of moves that we're looking for as white here. Now, me personally, I haven't seen any tactical solution for white yet, so I think what you do is you just castle and let black get the pawn back and the game goes on, you know? You could also develop the knight to d2 probably is like a pretty decent move to play as well while letting black take the pawn. What you don't want to do, though, I think, is go into this. Because then the rook seems well placed on b2. Your e-pawn is hanging. I'm kind of suspicious of making this bishop trade. Even though, in theory, this is your bad bishop, according to like the pawn structure, and this is a good bishop for black. So normally I would happily make that bishop trade if I could do it without changing the pawn structure. Like if I could just take the pieces off the board here as white, I might do that as my move, although I would still have to defend e5. So I'd feel more comfortable doing that if I were castled. But if we take into account the rook coming into b2 and the e5 and c2 pawns both hanging, I mean, I see a double defense in queen c3. But I still just don't like this option where black gets the open b file, even though it seems to me that you chase their rook back and you castle successfully. So you don't collapse tactically by trading on c5, but I just don't like what it does to the structure and giving black this file. You know, and it's conceivable because white does have maybe faster development. Maybe we'll take over the file in a moment, like knight. Oh, it would be black's move, knight e7. Yeah, so we're not going to take over the file in time, right? Like a4, rook here, black's there as well. So yeah, we don't take over by any means. Yeah, I would be slightly disinclined to make that trade from white's position here. So I'd be looking at knight d2 and castles as my moves. Saying, good job, black. Very nice sequence to win back your pawn. And now we're still just going to play a game, and I'd be looking forward to my plans from here, which would start with getting castled quickly. The other move you could really consider, I guess, would be queen g3, just because defending this spot can be so problematic for black. Or queen g4, similar. Maybe g4 is better. Attacking this and seeing if black will pay you a tribute tempo with g6, weakening their structure on the king side a little bit, and then castling. That would be like a clear improvement over castling if black had to play this g6 move. Another thing black might have is f5, defending the pawn laterally with the queen. That's a sneaky defense. You see that? The queen is sort of has a hidden defense of g7. We open it up like this. But white takes, and here's an advantage of queen g4 is that we can take this pawn with check. So I don't think black can play f5 against queen g4. Sometimes people play bishop f8, but then what's our plan? Like, what are we doing with this? Yeah, now that I think about it, I don't see like a brilliant answer for black against queen g4. So I think white should throw that in, even though when you get hit by a move like this, you're tempted to react very safely. You know what I mean? Like Cartier's first suggestion was castles. And that was my first suggestion as well. Like an experienced player, something like this happens and you're like, okay, I don't have the tactical juice here. I don't have my extra pawn. I just need to regroup. And we'll come up quickly with a plan like, let's get castled so we don't blunder our e-pawn, right? And then let's go like knight d2 as fast as we can and maybe c4. The idea with c4 is we don't want to let black get like even better with this pawn structure here. We want to get our rook involved in the game while black is finishing their development. So you see this engagement with c4, this plan of developing all our pieces. That's kind of a safety first approach when you get perhaps surprised by attacking. Maybe not surprised, you know, but like rook b8. It's kind of unfortunate, right, that black got their pawn back. White's strategy up to this point in the game, if you look at white's moves, was all about defending the extra pawn. Look from the beginning, you can see black spends 2 moves on the c5 break, and white says, because you spent so much time, I'm going to be able to grab this pawn and hold on to it. And look at white's following moves. Knight f3 defending e5. Right, bishop g4, bishop b5, keeping the knight off of there. e6 attacking this pawn, b4 defending it, right? a6, we give up our beautiful bishop to keep the knight from putting pressure on e5, right? And then bishop b2 defending e5, a3 defending. The whole strategy from white is to hold the extra pawn. Your opponent takes it. That can be really deflating, right, when that happens. And so a lot of people turn to like the safest possible move when something deflating happens. Does that make sense, everybody? That's like a very normal psychological characteristic. And I think it's the kind of characteristic that you'll find kind of equally, to some extent, as an instinct from a beginner level through an intermediate tournament player level through like a master through like a strong grandmaster. That the instinct is like a surprise happens and you try to like play safe or regroup, not blunder anything more. And queen g4 here, which is not played, rook a2 is the move just now. But queen g4 is the opposite, right? It's like taking a new tack, it's not finishing development, and it's aggressive. So psychologically, you have to make like a huge adjustment to look for a move like queen g4 in this position. And even if you see it, to go for it. Because part of you is saying like, no, I don't have good enough development. That's why bishop c5 happened to me. Right? So you see the move that Alex plays is a super defensive state of mind move, right? Like rook a2 is completely useless other than defending this bishop, threatening to take this bishop. And if this bishop moves away, the move rook a2 will have become completely useless, right? So unfortunately, you know, Alex's move here is really bad. Rook a2. And you know, 7 minutes was spent on it, like a good solid chunk. I do recommend spending time when surprised, you know, or when something unfortunate happens. So it's very logical. Something he didn't like happened, and he spent time. That's good. And then he came up with a defensive move that's not good, but it is that natural reaction. And when I said even strong grandmasters will have this reaction to play something really safe and passive, not necessarily passive, but something really safe, like develop, defend your stuff. Those are kind of the instincts. You may say, hey, David, like super GMs are way better than that. Like, don't say that about them. You're wrong. You know, they just keep playing the best they can. That's true, but their first instinct, I think, is still like us, but then they push through that instinct, right? So they push through the instinct, they regroup, they look at the position objectively, and they'll still try to notice, you know, what opportunities they have to go aggressive, and they'll still weigh all their options. But it's an effort of saying like, oh shoot, this happened, let me recover, and, you know, assess things objectively, reassess things. So I think Cartier is right. Black might try this very complicated move, knight e7. In this case, the idea being queen g7, rook g8, queen h7, rook g2. With a position that can only be described as loony, right? Black starting to attack f2. You could take, and black would have both rooks on your knight too. b2 and g2. Yeah, that's a real mess. that option there. But it's complicated because knight e7 cuts off this bishop's retreat as well. So if white played like a really dumb move like bishop c3, we would then have to retreat the bishop this way. Do we want to do that? Maybe. Yeah, I think knight e7 is a good move, Cartier. I think you're right that black should probably go for that versus just paying tribute. Yeah, I feel like this is a position where, yeah, black could play the aggressive option against white's aggressive option rather than paying tribute. Good catch, Cartier. Well judged. Okay, so let's continue with the game. Rook a2 played. And this move will surely be not as good as knight d2 or castles, and probably queen g4 or queen g3. So what's black going to do? Knight e7? Wait, doesn't that allow white to take? Wouldn't that be the one situation? Wasn't that the one point of rook a2 was to take this piece? Which is now offered? 1 second, sorry about this. Oh, Cross online, that's sick. Cross points out that Prabhav may be saying that b takes c5 is not even a threat here because of rook b2, queen e5. Holy moly, that is brutal. That is just brutal. And Prabhav plays rook takes b2 in 1 second after Gustafsson takes on c5. So Prabhav had definitely planned it, but Prabhav's making a mistake here in terms of time usage for sure. You've got 33 minutes on the clock. So when white takes on c5, I don't know if you should play a move in 1 second. It feels like you should double check before you sack your rook, no? I guess if you've been double checking it the whole time white was thinking, and it was your idea when you played knight e7, I can understand just blitzing out what you've planned. I can see both sides of it. From one perspective, like you've planned it, you just play it. From another perspective, if you're right about it, you're winning the game and you don't need much time for anything else. So why not give a double check? You guys see both sides of that? I'm not even sure which one is right in this situation. Those are the two perspectives here on the time usage on this one. Might have to go run downstairs for 1 more minute. This is brutal. By the way, folks, this idea with knight e7 was super complicated because white could have also played a move in response like queen to g3 or whatever. Remember I said there could be like complicating moves in tactical situations? White could play a move like queen g3 or queen e2, which defends e5, stopping the rook b2 tactic. So, for example, queen e2, defending this pawn. You can't castle now because we take this. Rook b2, there's no queen e5, see? So queen e2, you have to save the bishop. you save it, white takes. Okay? Or option 2, you know, like queen g4 and oh, sorry, I said queen g3, right? Sorry. Queen g3, and if you castle, there's pawn takes bishop because the queen's defending this. But this move is probably now refuted by knight f5, right? Hitting the queen, defending g7, everything works out for black. But the move queen e2 might win a pawn, even though we were just giving knight e7 an exclam. I mean, it gets an exclam for creativity and brilliance, but to what extent was it properly double-checked, right? One of the strongest players we have around, Cross Online, is saying, I think it's healthy in the long run to establish the habit of blunder checking if you have the time. So Cross knows that if you're under pressure and your opponent is just as strong as you and you're having a long, difficult game, there's such a thing as over double checking. You can't always double check. Sometimes you're using up your time resource and you really need it. But if you've got plenty of time and it's kind of a decisive moment in the game, then Cross is leaning towards, yeah, have the habit of double checking. Hey, Abject Pawn, welcome. Hope you had a great first game. I think queen e2 might actually not fully refute knight e7, but show knight e7 even to be a little dubious, maybe. Like, not the best option for black compared to, you know, maybe just retreating the bishop while the getting's good, right? And then the rook a2 move becomes irrelevant. So you got your pawn, they played an irrelevant move, and then you get to keep going from there, you know? Fun and tactical, the way you like it. Yeah, you can't ask for more than that, I guess. Or I suppose you always could, but it sounds good. Sounds good. So knight e7, maybe exclam, maybe dubious. Queen e2, asking a really important tactical question, right? Defending e5 while attacking a6. And that's why I say when you start building up tactical things, the more complicated your tactical idea or construction, the more there is to potentially double check, the more that could go wrong. Okay? Okay, so in the game, we get here, 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 king d2, queen b2. I'm going to leave this position running for a minute and go check on the kid's situation. Be back really soon. The dog has not walked yet, sorry.
She really wants to walk closer to you.
Yeah, she's all wild.
She like needs to pee, I think.
Yeah.
I'll take her off when I get back home.
Okay.
I'm going, bye.
Cool, bye. All right, everybody, so that wasn't too bad. So I don't know if bishop a7 was the only move after queen e2. It's a little complicated. Maybe black's got something else. It does seem like the bishop's attacked, though. I don't at the moment see another move for black, but there could be something more complicated going on. There could be elements of bluffing involved as well, Hosta, yeah. Or whatever the opposite of bluffing is, right? Like pretend like you've blundered pawn takes bishop, right? You could either pretend like you've blundered pawn takes bishop and then haha, you have rook b2. Or you could act like you've got it all figured out and like, you know, queen e2 is nothing. Depends on the level of the players, right? 1300, 1500, 1800, 2000, etc. You know, what they're going to be expecting of each other and how much they're double checking each other and so forth, you know? All right, so we get this. Queen c3, defending the king, takes. Okay, And so Gustafsson at least escapes into an endgame here as his king is stuck in the center. So that is nice for him. The tactics have worked out for Prabov, but queen c3 was a good choice because there's a good chance of saving the endgame, actually, despite being down a pawn here. So black is up a pawn, these two against this one. It's a pretty imposing extra pawn, but you have to remember, like, endgame technique is different at every level, right? If it were Ding versus Gukesh, then you might say black is more or less winning, or white is sort of terminal unless they find something incredible. And if you were at like a 2000 level, it would already be like a big advantage, but you don't know for sure. And at a 1500 level, yeah, you've got no idea whether or not black has the technique to convert it. On top of that, basically the idea for white is that you've got rook b1, rook b6 coming, or rook b7, and that could be just a massive hassle in the castle, right, from black's perspective. So yeah, I think you could get like a pretty competitive endgame here still, most likely. And we see Prabov using some time. You know, Prabov reflected on the queen trade and is now reflecting on how to approach this endgame. The first question when you reach an endgame like this, well, I mean, there's more than one different approach to chess, right? But one question that comes to mind pretty quickly when you reach an endgame like this is, do you want to centralize your king or castle? Right? That's the first question when you're sort of trading pieces and you've never yet castled and you have a choice, like, do I castle or do I stay in the middle of the board? You would lean towards staying in the middle of the board, but none of these chess principles are absolute. Okay? Depending, is it an endgame with 2 rooks or 1 rook? You know, how's my king position? Depending on various factors, you know, you don't always keep your king in the center, but like your first thought would be like, oh, maybe I can just keep my king in the center. Which Prabov has chosen to do after a good 2-minute think, which I think is kind of perfect on this move here. The other thing that really comes to mind is this rook b1, rook b6 idea. If you see it for your opponent, you can start thinking, like, how am I going to deal with it? Right? And as Cartier says, king d7 to c7 is the best way to try and deal with it. And it involves a couple passive and abject moves that are being given to us by this pawn. Right? You bring the king here to keep the rook out of b7. It can still come into b6. Right? And then you play rook a8, just defending the pawn. But next move, you're going to play knight c8, and you're going to push them out. And then you're going to get back into the game. And it's going to come in time. So it seems white's initiative, so to speak, runs out here, and this knight can't increase the pressure before black can play knight c8. If you were white and the knight had one more move, and so you could hop like knight e2, knight d4, tie their knight to this square, right? They go e5, you go knight f3, you're attacking that thing. Like, you could start poking around and trying to find points. You know, if you were on f3, you could be looking at knight g5 and knight e5. You could find ways to maybe make something out of where the rook is, or knight a2, knight b4 maybe. With knight a2, knight b4, even if this pawn saves itself with a5, you get to play knight a6 check, push the king back, for example, to c8, then the knight can't go to c8, right? Or if the king goes to b7, you can maybe play rook b7 check. So if you had another tempo here for white with the knight, just a little more juice, you might actually be able to make this endgame super tough for black. But as far as I can see, if black finds this exact sequence from abject pawn and just plays the passive moves you have to, including bringing the knight back to c8, you'll be able to push the rook out and then get around to simply converting an extra pawn endgame with no counterplay or disadvantage to countervail the material. Okay, let's see. We're at king d7. Gustafsson thinking. Let me grab some water as we start to settle into this. It's been a long time since we've done this show, right? It's been probably 3 weeks. I think we missed 2 weeks of tournaments during the Championships. How do folks feel about the the different focuses? A few weeks of World Championship level chess, or it could be candidates or Wei Kanze, interspersed with a few weeks of like Jesse, Kosti, and my training, a few weeks of going over viewer games and stuff like that. Does that give you guys whiplash, or is it for you kind of like for me, a pleasant variety? I know not everybody loves variety the same way that I do. I understand it's not a universal thing. My mic stopped working. Oh, sorry. The question is like, how do people feel about the variety and change of pace on Dojo? I'm like a huge fan of variety. So I'm trying to get like a gut check because I know not everybody has the same feeling as me. But like sometimes we like intensely cover, super GM level chess. Other times we just cover like 1500 level chess for a couple weeks. Other times we cover like our own stuff. So Black's pieces will be passive, but it'll be really temporary, I think, Cartier, right? Once we play knight c8, the white rook will retreat. Then we'll play rook b8, probably. Then the white rook will maybe give up the b file to avoid a rook trade. And then the knight will come out from c8 back to e7, etc., etc. Like for me, I love that we don't just do Grandmaster chess all year. And I love that we don't just do 1200 chess all year. I love making the changes and the transitions, having a period where I focus on my chess, a period where I focus on our viewers' chess, a period where I focus on professional chess, a period where we focus on like, maybe more entertainment, dojo talks, or a game show or something. For me, that's nice. It'd be good if we could have some more of that variety like every week instead of in periods, right? If there were more of us, yeah. I definitely think Viral Stigma that where we are right now, the dojo needs 2 more chess teachers, like 100%. Rook b1 played, king c7. So that like even when we're covering the World Championships, if we had somebody else to cover a few days, I took a few days off, I could still run Friday night fights, Saturday arenas. Then I could go back to covering the World Championship, and someone else could take a day off and do some other stuff. Like me personally, I don't even have a preference between viewer commentary, my own training, and Super GM chess, and random other things we do. Like I truly just love bouncing around. Cartier predicts that white could start improving the knight here instead of even going for rook b6. Abject Pawn says that as white, focus on going f4, knight e2, knight d4. Maybe not even play rook b1 here, I guess, is what Abject Pawn is saying. King c7 is good for black, so why even do it? Interesting. Well, like let's say we played f4 and black immediate played f6, for example, that would be perhaps imprecise because we would go rook b1, king c7, rook e1, king d7, rook b1. All right. So if we went for f4, black would actually have to be a little cautious, perhaps first play rook b8 so the king can stay here. And then after knight e2, now go for f6. And now we're ready to meet knight d4 with e5, I think. White plays rook e1. We might have to play e5 anyway, because when the knight moves, it'll be too late. I suppose knight g6 would be an alternative here. Oh, there's probably a fair number of alternatives. Knight g6 is the prominent one. But okay, this would be like the main move, would be to push. White could take this file, we could get here. That seems okay. White could move the knight somewhere, but it feels like king e6 is actually pretty strong now. Black feels pretty powerful in the center. I feel very confident that the king can get out there and fight, support the pawns. Support his pawns, yeah. Okay, so we get rook b1, king c7. My instinct is objectively there's nothing in particular white can do to accomplish something or stop black from starting to convert. It's just a question of what poses a few problems for your opponent to think about, and then eventually you're just going to have to defend down a pawn for a while. So you want to extend the game as long as possible, get the black player to play as many moves as possible, so there's the bigger chance that they make a slip at some point, basically. Someone also mentioned correctly that if black takes the b file, white could be going knight a4, knight b6 to block it. It's another option. Okay, rook b6 blade. Yeah. Kind of exactly what we expected. Maybe when black plays knight c8 eventually to dig out, white should play rook b4. So that against rook b8, you could go over to like h4 and g4 and poke at the structure. And basically what you do when you make the pawns move, you might get them into the wrong positions that hurts black's overall flexibility towards the center. Because let's say to play e5 at some point, black might need f6, but because of how they answered rook g4, rook h4, the pawn structure on the king side might not permit f6 anymore, you know? Hey, Murat. Greetings from California to you. Hope the gathering winter is not too unpleasant for you. Rook a8 gets played relatively quickly. Prabhat understood that this defensive posture had to be taken. Now white starts to improve the knight, yeah. Playing c4 might help white, Viral Stigma, yeah, because right now these two c-pawns are not amazing. And the dream for black is probably to play f6, e5, and put the king on e6 and start to really dominate white positionally. And if you push white out of the center, you could even try and target the c5 pawn to win a second pawn, right? That's a real likely weakness on c5, quite attackable. So from white's position, if you play c4 and maybe trade the c-pawn, you might weaken black's center and have more chances of defending your own c5 pawn. So you should definitely consider c4. Now, Abject Pawn says maybe now black can already play e5 now that the knight's on e2. Yeah, quite possibly. Right, so let's try a variation. e5. c4, d4, f4, f6. Right? Now, I'm going to try to say that your rook is passive for the moment, and your king is also kind of passive dealing with my rook. So this is my king's big chance, right? You do connect 4. Let me break it up and head for this pawn. Yeah. Sorry to hear it. That is what we have going for us here. Is the weather here. That is true, Cross. We definitely are taxed. Especially because Chess Dojo has now also kind of become a chess technology company by accident as well. Like, as we keep building new features for the website, Kostya, Jesse, and I have to act as sort of product managers. Right? We have to spec out all those things. Even if Jack and Jalp and Bessie do the heavy lifting, we still have to spec stuff, and just overall the company, so to speak, is getting bigger. Not in revenue yet, but in work. So there is like a taxing element to it. And yeah, we just need to grow in people to match the vision that Jesse and Kostya are growing. They're pushing the growing vision, not I. I'm happy to just sit around and talk about chess on Twitch. I already built chess.com. I don't really have this like thirst or need or appetite to build something like that all over again. No need. That's why I had that dojo topic about enough. Dojo Talks topic about enough was partly because it was like Kostya and Jesse want more, and I've done more, and now I kind of want less. So I just think it's like an interesting topic, because I feel like most young people at least want more, and then some number of people as we get older sort of, not everybody, some people still want more forever, right? But some people as they get older are like, okay, less would be enough. What are we really striving for? But back to the interesting endgame before us, this concept that we just had with e5, c4, d4, you can see that there's a real fight going on here. You can't immediately tell if this is working out for white or black, right? And if we have to play knight g6 to defend the e-pawn, then that means our rook is kind of forever tied, right? So let's say I go knight g6. King comes here. Now, what do? I have a couple options for black. I could play a5, so the pawn is just a little slower or harder for white to capture, right? Or I can simply sack it with rook f8 and go for rook f2. Now, I think a5 is going to be the best option, as Abject Pawn says, but I just want to point out like this basic idea just so we understand this is a real option. This is like the ebb and flow of how chess endgames get played. You get stuck to a weakness, but at some point, like some people think like, oh, you can't move the rook. I've tied you to this pawn. No, I can't move the rook without a cost, right? So sometimes it comes and goes. Like you're up a pawn, then you give back the pawn to activate your pieces. Then your opponent has to give a pawn to deal with your active pieces, right? So like rook f8, rook a6, rook f2, right? And then you see stuff like knight here and, taking here, or maybe checking and pushing the king back. It depends what is at stake, and what works or doesn't work tactically. Here, this doesn't work. But there's often that kind of ebb and flow and back and forth of, material for activity and activity for material and so forth, right? Now, the reason this is not the best approach probably for black is that rook a7 is looming very quickly, and and the a pawn could start coming, and basically white's not having a huge threat here, so you're not in a rush to play rook f8. Right? So I would go like a5 probably, and then after a4, and there's other options for white. Knight c1 to d3 actually probably makes the most sense. Yeah. Okay, but let's say after a4, you would see rook f8. And yes, white gets rook a6 and rook a7 and all that. King b7 is probably useless because of check. And if you go this way, you lose the c pawn. If you go this way, you repeat. So you're probably going like here and here and here. And I don't know if white takes or throws the check. Let's say takes. But basically this is, an issue. White has real chances, right? Fair enough. The rook on the 7th rank. You see there's major technical difficulties. On top of that, when black plays a5, instead of a4, there is this big option of going knight c1. The point of which is against rook f8, we don't even go rook a6, we go knight d3, covering rook f4 and rook f2. And now black's counterplay is not as obvious. It's a little unwieldy. And if it takes more time, fine, right? Rook f1 here, 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 check, here, here. Compared to the other position, the rook's not even on h3. It's 2 steps away. There's a danger that we'll take h7 first and defend the h-pawn, right? And look at this king on b8. It looks really bad compared to this one. So this doesn't feel, it doesn't feel to me like we're going to convert, but, I could be wrong. There's details. There's this move with the idea of rook check, taking this knight. King f5. Jesus. Hard to ever know for sure. I think here the connected passed pawns would actually win, despite black's king's terrible position. But again, white has all kinds of options. There's this really complicated tactical move here, knight e5, right? Because if knight takes, rook takes, and if rook check, king here, if knight takes, king takes rook, and if rook takes, rook g6. So we might be able to play knight e5 here, and maybe rook e3 doesn't even work for black. Now, if knight e5 works for white, black has to start scrambling for a draw, because any dream of winning is gone, right? Like, the 2 connected passed pawns fell apart. We don't have anything else good on the board here, right? c6 hanging, king bad, h7 hanging, d4 hanging. Hey, Dabo, welcome in. Good to see you. And yeah, I guess if you love snowboarding, then the winter won't bother you in the same way. So, as Cartier is saying, like, it's at this point that I start to feel like, oh, this is quite a tricky endgame, right? And when you first look at this endgame, by the way, our analysis is 13 to 14 moves in from the live position, which was here in e2. When you first look at this, you might think, well, black just has an extra pawn, and, they're going to put it in the center and get a dominating central position, and eventually you should win, right? That was the first thing I said. I was like, if it were Gukesh versus Ding, it would be kind of a foregone conclusion. But for players around 2000, it would already be difficult. Well, yeah, classical chess will allow a 2000 player to get through a lot of this stuff that I was just showing you guys. But you can see that there's some decisions and some really intricate possibilities, including difficult calculation that comes up eventually. So. Salut, Svartal. Okay, so let's see what these guys have chosen to do. It's tricky. You're right, Eduardo. Maybe in that position towards the end of the line, rook e2 check first, pushing the king. Yeah. Yeah, defending the e pawn and trying to then push it. Yeah. That could do it. Still like a messy and complicated feeling, that endgame, right? So it was this line, and yes, you're saying here maybe rook e2 would bother white. with the idea that if the king comes to f3, rook e3 wins the knight, and if the king comes this way, you start rolling the pawns as quickly as you can. Now the last ditch for white is going to be something like knight b4, right? And you're playing d3, and white's taking here and king here, and this knight is preventing white from setting up a famous, perpetual check. If this knight weren't here, there's a famous perpetual check pattern where you put your rook on e7. Imagine this knight's on like f3 or whatever. And then if these pawns advance, you've got knight a7, knight c6. There's no way for the king to get out of this because every time the knight checks on c6, it defends the rook. And if the king goes in the corner, it allows rook a7 mate. So, like, even this situation here, I would say looks complicated. White doesn't have rook e7. But even here, maybe there's... Oh, no. I was going to say maybe there's this insane option to go here and then play checkmate on c7. But black queens with check. Thank you, Cross. I appreciate it. I hope so for you, too. And maybe we can get in a game next week. It's going to be the last week of school for the kids before the Christmas break. So maybe we can try and get in a game next week. I was just gradually getting more and more wrecked by the World Championship thing. It's just every day I was weaker than the day before. So Abject Pawn's been waiting for a match for a while, huh? Anyone else want to play a game? No pressure. But you know, these tournaments, like, they stay open. They operate as arenas. They last 24 hours, not so that you play for 24 hours, but so that you play a game. Sometime within 24 hours that's convenient for you. So Abject Pawn here. I just mentioned to those who don't know that you could play a game. And Abject Pawn here is waiting for one. Okay, so Eduardo says, yes, there's still some complication here. The king move doesn't work, but maybe give the check again. I don't even know which way the king should go. And then you go c6, threatening c7, c8. Ooh la la. It's tricky. Maybe the answer is really clear if we were really focused. You know, players over 2,000 sitting at the board, calculating really hard in classical with plenty of time still on the clock. Maybe it would be clear. But my feel looking at it back here and trying to estimate in advance choices around c4 and whether to push d4 or whether to maybe just play f6 and hold the center like this. Like, to me, it feels a little complex. I'm not confident I would be making the right decisions around this point here. I do think I could calculate okay with 15-20 minutes on the clock like they have if we got to those tactics at the end, but it would be like a little intense for me. I think I could just barely do it. And Viral Stigma says maybe just take so that the knight can come to d5. And in fact, if we rush the king towards taking this pawn, then this is very unfortunate. So in a sense, by taking this way, you're even keeping the white king from coming forward for the moment. So that makes sense. That makes sense for sure, Viral Stigma. I was thinking that maybe what I would do as black is go kick here and then f6. And my point is, if white takes, I will take and just move my king up this way. But there's probably more than one good way to play. There's a chance there's more than one good way to play for black, because black is up a very clean center pawn. And center pawns, you know, well, I mean, like this, you can feel that they limit the king and knight's ability to get to good squares. You know, it's enough of a center. Mohana Krishna, is that maybe a question? Like, do you play viewers? Sometimes I do. Today, viewers are playing against each other, and I'm providing my thoughts and commentary on the games so that people can, you know, see games around their level analyzed in detail in the moment. The players themselves will watch the video later to see what I thought and compare it with what they were thinking during the games. But for anyone rated between 1400 and 1700, say this matchup's going to be really interesting to see how they play and what I think of it and the tips I have. And then there's players of different ratings playing. Later I'll look at a game of somebody of a different rating, and it'll be super useful for a different segment of our viewership. Okay, let's look a little more what's happened. So knight e2, knight c8, chased it back, rook a7. Interesting. I thought black would go rook b8 immediately here. The issue is white's going to, run over here probably and avoid a rook trade, I think. Yep, there comes the rook. Wow, and black had sort of planned that. Rook a7 was to go here and not have to make any pawn commitments. But the king is way passive there, right? White's got knight d4 in time. Did we catch up with the live position? No, okay, knight d4. Rook here came in. This is not easy for black at all, actually. This king is so passive, and rook is passive too. You always have rook b3 pushing the king to the a file. Rook g3 first, of course. Yeah, just probing to see if black's going to play f6 or g6. F6 not possible here because of knight e6. Not easy. Yeah. Well, you can't pick white abject pawn. White is still down a pawn. But certainly the technical task still looks very challenging from black's perspective, right? Like, this is not going to be an easy one. Not going to be easy. You like f4, right? We're assuming g6, right? Oh, g6 just got played. And you're saying f4, right? Stopping e5, stopping g5. If f6, you have knight e6. Rook can't support the pawn because of this. King and knight are struggling to improve themselves. If the knight moves, basically white can always go check here, here. And now you're kind of frozen. Like, you can't move anything. Actually, I understand why Abject Pawn said that they would pick white. Even though white's down a pawn here, black almost can't move a single thing. And so you start to wonder, could white walk their king to f6 and somehow win the game by surprise, down a pawn? That could eventually happen if black, doesn't react properly in time. What you have to remember as black is you are allowed to sack a pawn to stop being passive, right? Like, at some point you could play a move like rook b7, knight takes, rook takes, and try and activate. You don't have to sit there and just lose passively forever, but it is getting hard because, I mean, your king is so bad, right? You have to do this and then, like, threads to get active again. I don't know. It looks really, it does look really hard to play for black actually now. Rook b3 check has been played, and then f4 will be very important here for Gustafsson. And Gustafsson finds it. Okay, so we are in the midst of a very difficult situation. A very, very intense and competitive endgame actually now. And I will say what Abject Pawn said about picking white is not insane actually. Despite, I mean, black's up a pawn. How could you pick white? No, it's not insane. I don't really see what black can do at all. Don't really see anything to do. That's incredible. Actually, white is probably equalized. Simply because I can't suggest a single thing for black to do. One of the most important things that Alex did, folks, was going to the third rank when getting chased back by this knight on c8. Rook b4 would have been about equivalent. I don't know if there was like a big difference, But the important thing was not coming all the way back to b1 and then after rook b8 just losing the file. The really important thing was recognizing that it was going to make it harder for black if you poke at these kingside pawns. It will make it harder for black to later advance in perfect order. The king walk by black has been bad. I agree, abject pawn. On a central square, the king could have potentially defended 2 weak points instead of 1. So now, yeah, it's like he went off to do a protest, right? Yeah, I could dream about trying to improve white's position. That's crazy, abject pawn. I have ideas. Like, I have the idea I could go a4, a5, and maybe put my rook on b6. And black could be so cramped that they might not be able to take with the knight. So I could tie them down to these pawns with the rook and have that extra space from the a pawn. And then if their knight's on e7, at some point I could go maybe c3 and knight c2, knight b4 and win the a pawn outright. Oh, God. In addition to the dream plan of bringing the king to into the king side, of course, which I think black might be able to stop just by playing h6, but black can't move much. I mean, I'm not certain that black could stop white's king from walking in either. Okay, so we get knight e7. And so I would expect rook b6 here, attacking those pawns. Oh, man. Yeah, black could be worse. Man, abject pawns. Are you a master? Are you a master to have understood this so quickly that someone could be better down a pawn in the endgame? I mean, you caught that much faster than me. I just thought white could make things hard for black. I never imagined white could even have an advantage. Humble 1800 who loves endgames. Dang. Well, you've got a really good sense of a certain kind of endgame here, that's for sure. Gustafsson just stops the move knight f5 and grabs some space on the king side. Okay, it's a perfectly fine concept from Gustafsson, but throwing in rook b6 first is very precise because on b6 the rook attacks all these pawns. Oh, shoot! Now we see how important it is. Prabhav, actually, this move, yeah, keeps the rook from getting to b6, huh? Ay, ay, ay. Well, Prabhav found the moment to get back into the game. This was starting to become impossible for black. So g4 is an inaccuracy. You got to throw in rook b6, threatening these pawns. And then, sure, you could play g4 next. Knight f3 is possible, but how bad is f6 for black? Would you maybe play g5 just to gain that square for your knight anyway, even if there won't be a pawn to attack? I mean, definitely, if you're gonna, you should. Definitely, my first instinct here is to let black trade the rooks and recapture and keep my space and try and keep my bind. I don't like the idea of moving away because now with my pawns on f4 and g4, I can't pressure these pawns with my rook, so I'm just giving the file and then the black's improving their pieces. Maybe g5 first, nailing down the weakness on f7. Holy moly, you are quite the endgame player, abject pawn. That is, yeah, that is some impressive thinking there. I like that idea quite a bit. So, folks, this is how endgame thinking works, you know? Like, you think of an idea and then you iterate it, right? You're like, I would like to go after this. Oh, but there's this way of dealing with it. Oh, so maybe I can do this first, etc., right? So look, our first thought was knight f3 going to e5. And then we thought, oh, f6. Then we thought, okay, maybe we go knight f3, and when they go f6, we go g5, winning control of the square, because black can't play g7. See why it mattered that rook g3 made black advance the g-pawn? It allows us to win squares, right? It just took away the flexibility of black's structure. We're getting an outpost on e5 for the knight because rook g3 attacked the g7 pawn. Do you guys understand? Do you guys see that at least? You don't have to fully understand completely how that works in all scenarios, but do you see the relation in this case between the g-pawn move and the control of e5 for a knight? That's part of the complexity of chess, is these effects that different squares have all over the board, and why pawn moves are treated so delicately by masters in some cases. So we get something like this, but then I was thinking like, well, but knight e5 now doesn't attack f7, it only attacks here, right? So black can maybe activate the knight, and against this move, just defend here. So then abject pawn comes up with the idea after rook b7 to go g5. And the point is, after takes, there's no f6, and white wants to go here, 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 here. Oops. Right? It's just brutal. This technique, g5, this is doing two things at once. It's securing an outpost square by preventing f6. That's a typical idea that you'll see in all kinds of openings. In fact, if we go to like a very, very basic opening, like d6, the Pirc, this move is played to secure f6 for the knight. Because if knight f6, white has e5. So the move d6 is played so that after white plays their next move, whether it be knight f3, knight c3, d4, whatever, black plays knight f6, attacking the pawn, and this pawn is securing the square for the knight. Okay, in this position it's more complicated because it relies on this tactic, but in general, that's the meaning of d6 on move 1. The meaning of d6 on move 1 is I want to put the knight here, and this pawn secures the square for it. So, to our position, g5, right? The pawn move 2 steps away from the intended outpost is to secure the outpost. See, this pawn does the same thing. So g5 is securing the outpost for the knight, but at the same time is doing something we call fixing a weakness. It's keeping the f-pawn from moving so that we can attack it. And the point of fixing a weakness is basically that if you attack things willy-nilly, they'll usually move away from the attack. Does that make sense? You just attack a piece, it moves away. You attack another piece, it moves away. If there's no plan beyond that, you're just attacking things at random, which is typical, from 0 to 700 or so. That you'll see some people who play like that, more aggressive players. Some people don't attack anything, but So just attacking things and they move away, attacking them, they move away. Okay, at some point you realize, man, it would be really nice if that thing were immobilized and then I attacked it and it didn't move away, right? So this g-pawn move, g5, it fixes a weakness on f7, and yeah, what's black supposed to do about that, right? Okay, in the game, we get knight f3 from Gustafsson, trade, f6, keeping the knight out of e5. Yes, Fatal, good point. So let's say we play our g5 move, which was probably a good move. Black could go takey, knight g8, preparing f6, right? But there's knight takes c6, so black can't do it yet. They need to pay a tempo with king b7 first. Now, if knight f3, knight g8, nice, good move. And here you're going to play f6. Great. Yeah, that might do it for black. There's a number of interesting options here, but I think your plan might defend. But let me just show you one or two interesting things. We could go knight d7, attacking the pawn, takes. And my plan is to go knight f8 and attack these pawns. If you go h6, I can trade, and I'm still double attacking pawns, actually. Knight d7. It also has a weird threat, by the way, which looks like this. Actually, after h6, maybe the threat works, right? Because before I was thinking, king c7, knight here. This knight d7 has several threats. You guys see that h6, knight f6 might hurt black really badly? Tricky threat with the g-pawn hanging. Sometimes this will be a blind spot for people because white's down a pawn, so they won't look at trades, but knight takes, pawn takes, and the pawn queens. So you go knight f6, this knight moves, you take. Obviously, this h-pawn is going to be an issue here for these pieces. So knight f6 might be a winning move in this position. I want to check real quick. Yeah. Super cool. I'm going to clip that position just because it's such a cool... It's not complicated, but it's a cool little tactic. I'm going to grab it. If this lets me. PGN. Clip defend. Close it. Okay. I'm going to go open my endgame positions. Okay, so actually h6 doesn't work, and overall, even this knight g8 f6, knight d7 is not obvious what black does here, right? Right, so when we play knight d7, my main idea was to go knight f6, right? And I was imagining here that I would go knight f6 next and try and queen the pawn, and I was in range of the king, but then there's this. So here, this pawn's threatened, maybe it goes here, take this, here. You can see this endgame has become quite competitive. Black's got a great center, but pawns are now equal. White's got a potential passer out here, and maybe a breakthrough here. So black has to watch all sides of this, and also knight f8 freezes this knight, and maybe keeps the king at bay a little bit. I guess he's got king d8 to e8, right? If black weren't clever, I could play h4 and then at some point like knight g6, h5, and maybe break through with the pawns. I don't know, it's interesting. It's quite interesting. Okay. King c7, you're saying knight f6 instead of knight f8. Oh yeah, don't give the opponent time to play e5. Do this first. Let's say they move the knight away. Maybe we get the same position? Yeah. Oh, but the other problem is when the king moves, you can't play knight f6 because here and the king's close enough. So we have, like, when the king comes in the square, we can't go to f6 anymore, but we have knight f8 with the double attack, and we win a pawn. So that's the strength of this g5 idea, right? I mean, this g5 move, way back here, it fixes two different weaknesses, right? We've got a lot of juice, actually, for white to make threats with just this one knight. As somebody said, knights are so tricky, right? Yes, Faustine Fava said that. Knights are so tricky, right? So there's actually quite a bit of juice in this seemingly utterly simple position. But we actually couldn't figure it out. Like, several good players in 5 to 10 minutes time just to start getting a handle on what's possible. Okay, so in the game, Pravov gets f6. Knight comes back to d4, hitting e6, which has to move. Knight comes in. King tries to get closer. Knight g5, poking for weaknesses. And again, what about g5? Fixing that weakness first and knight f8 next move, right? Well, of course, rook b6 dominating was much better than this abject pawn, right? But what's interesting is Even after we missed rook b6 from white's perspective, and black digs the king out, it's still a few steps away from the center, and white has some momentary juice here. And look, again, we've got this theme that if you fix the weakness before knight f8, what's black supposed to do? Hasn't this endgame just become basically a toss-up? The tempi are less good as the variations we were looking at before. Before, we were fixing things with g5, and black was trying to fight out with knight g8 and f6 themselves to break out. In this version, we played knight f3, knight d4, knight e6, and black's knight never had to go back to g8. So we're several tempi down compared to what we did before. Right? We're several tempi down. And it's still, this g5 move looks like pretty much a toss-up endgame. With knight g5, maybe he's thinking of going knight f7 next, right? To find a route for the king. So h6 would be a mistake because you get double attacked. So we have to imagine that Prabhav would go for h5. Now you could take, or you could just go knight f7. Right away, right? Say knight f7 here, king here. This king starts to come. Interesting situation, right? White's down a full pawn, but the black king isn't there yet, which means the white king is getting some decent territory. But if we go too far, then this move might queen, right? So there, and same with king g5, right? So there's a limit to how much we can activate the king when the opponent has two connected, protected passers. But maybe there'd be a thing you could go like g5, trying to lock in the space you have here. And the idea would be that black maybe can't make any progress. Here's the argument. If knight here, you go check and take this. Or if the king comes this way, maybe you take this one. I don't know. It depends what you think is safer. And if the king comes forward, you check him, and you've created a wall with the placement of these pieces, right? So pawn, 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 and the knight covering from here. So the king has to go back, and you just sort of say, hey, no progress. Might be interesting. Might be something that Prabhav is worrying about how to get around right now as they're thinking about this move. Wow, what a great endgame this actually turned out to be. It seemed, I think for a lot of people, it may have seemed like, wow, Prabhav just won the opening battle, right? When the tactics with that rook takes b2, queen e5. Right? It might seem like Prabhav just won the opening battle. White's king is on the run. Black's up a pawn. There was a part of me that thought, like, okay, maybe we switch to another game now, right? Like Alex sort of messed up the opening, didn't assess this rook takes b2 idea right, or missed it coming, and we just go to a different game because White's eventually going to win. But then Alex put up such good defense, right? Made the important decision to staunch the bleeding with queen c3, threatening the g-pawn, as well as the queen. So Prabhav said, okay, yeah, we'll take queens off the board. That develops the knight. The rook gets the jump on the b file. And this endgame proved extremely interesting so far. h5 played after quite a while of thought. Knight f7, e4. The abject pawn at some point improves White's position to advance the pawns on the queen side. So in that line that we were looking at, which was something like, well, not king e5, something like g5 here. And it was not clear how black makes progress, but it's clear how white makes progress, right? White wants to go b4 and a4 to get these pawns closer to queening if you need a breakthrough over there for counterplay. So it's not at all easy still. Yeah, not at all easy. Hey, Alyssa, glad to hear you had a tricky game and a good one. King e3 played here. Yeah, so the king improves itself. And it could go to one of these two squares. We'll see. Yeah, I think that position that we looked at a moment ago is going to be a really critical one for this line, right? This position right here. If we get to this in a couple moves, very unclear how black makes progress, right? With the knight busy defending this pawn, the king not able to come forward. I don't really know what the progress would be. So here we see Prabhov making a pawn trade. And then bringing the king. White can still try and set up a similar thing with g5 and king f4. Right? And we'll see if there's a way for black to make progress against that. I haven't seen it yet. Here would be king f4, king d7, g5. Get knight e5. Oh, taking away this square from the king. Makes a lot of sense as well. And you're attacking this pawn so the knight can't move. I can see why Alex chose this one. Man, oh man. Oh. Man, this game is a very, very full meal. It's got every course. Right, black could try g5 here to free up the knight, but after knight f7, you would need something like here, 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 winning this pawn. King f4 defending it. You can't yet sack. White's still in range of these pawns. If you push here, white can take, trading it. And if you push here, knight e4 looks good for white. Huh. That looks fine for white, right? To just take with the knight, yeah. Hi, Neetham. Welcome to the later stages of a very difficult, intricate, glorious knight endgame. This one is really good. An interesting thing about this is if white goes king f4 at some point, this could now be a big mistake because black might be able to play g5 check and you might not be able to take because of the pawns running. And then after g5 check, if you have to spend a move coming back, black can improve the knight to g8 and f6 quickly. So if black passes here, plays like a5 or king d8 or something, the right move for white is not going to be obvious. It might be moving these pawns forward a bit. It might be g5, but you have to calculate knight f5 as well. It might be king d4. Just going king d4, king e3, king d4, king e3. Like saying my king's job is to keep these pawns from queening. Like this looks active, but we're not playing king g5 and letting these pawns go, right? So do your job. If black can't make progress, that's what you're looking for more than anything, is a place where you can mark time without worsening your position. So you're never in Zugzwang, basically. Okay, abject pawn has the idea of playing a5, a4 for black, sack the pawn and make a route for the king to get in. Makes sense. I'm glad you like the World Championship coverage, and I did send the lads a message today saying we are going to do like a World Championship wrap-up dojo talk, right? We have another dojo talk that people voted on in Patreon. You know, we've sort of like finally re-updated or reintegrated or starting to re-update and reintegrate a little bit the Patreon thing. And so we're having people on Patreon suggest topics and then vote on topics and so forth. And there was a winning topic in a poll, which was ranking the top 5 greatest chess authors of all time. So that is on our docket, so to speak, waiting for us to record that. But I think this week we should record that and a World Championship wrap-up. All right, GG to my first opponent, says Clock Goblin. Getting coffee, and Clock Goblin could be convinced to play a second game if somebody's looking for a second game. It's intense to play a classical game, and it's really intense to play 2 classical games in a row. But there are some people in the dojo who do it on Friday night, and I neither encourage nor discourage it, I think. At least it's my intention to neither encourage nor discourage it. G5 was played, and after lengthy thought, and white goes for knight f7, collecting that pawn, knight g6. This is going to be intense. I think I neither encourage nor discourage people to play a second game on Friday night fights. Obviously, folks are welcome to do what they like in general. But I sometimes also give people advice, like, you know, you're going to find this tiring, you're not going to enjoy this, or you should give it a try, you know, some like mild pressure for somebody to try out a tournament if they never have and they're hesitating for some reason. But, you know, I try not to put too much pressure in general on people. So yeah, playing 2 games is hefty, but we do have a few people do it, so. Clock Goblin's been training with a 1900. Okay. Always great to be able to do some serious training with someone else, especially somebody strong can be helpful. White's going to get a passed pawn now. Like, I assume Alex is thinking a little bit. He's only got 5 minutes, but he's got the 30-second increment, and he's thinking for a moment, just assessing, okay, what's black up to, right? It makes sense. Like, you went after this pawn. You know you had this plan. You kind of had to go for it, but it's not bad to spend a minute or two checking, like, what am I going to do next move if they play knight e5 going after this pawn, right? So we can also do the same thing while Alex does it. So knight g5 is the first move we would look at. Knight e5, king f4, defending the pawn. Can black push d4 or e3? We can quickly satisfy ourselves that no, right? We can take, or possibly even take the knight, right? Could calculate it. But black's idea is going to be to play knight d3 check. You come back and then grab this pawn over here. Keeping an extra pawn on the board for black, right? 3 against 4. Now white's got counterplay on the king side with a passed pawn, but Alex has to consider this. And yeah, think about how he wants to answer it, which could include, oh, he cuts off the knight e5 move. Oh, stone cold move from Alex. What an idea. I was going to say it could include calculating like here, maybe like knight check and some fancier variations. But I didn't really see how we would make it work with king d7. It was just like, I was like, maybe I'll look in that direction, see if there's anything fancy here. You know, but look at this move from Alex. Wow. Oh, spending 2 minutes at this point really paid off. He cuts off the knight e5 route. He's still covering this pawn, and he's got knight g5 coming. Oh, it's like brilliant. This is really, he understood that the king's job is to stop these two pawns. It's not to come up actively. It's not to be a hero. It's not to queen something on the king side. That's up to the knight to harass. The king's job is to stop two passers because the king's a bit better at that than a knight. King d4. Brilliant defense from Alex here. And folks, you saw Ding's blunder in the last game of the World Championship match. So I think everybody right now is acutely aware of, no matter how good you are, when you've been playing for 40, 50 moves, when you've been playing for a couple hours, when you've reached whatever your personal like stamina might be at, right? And we all have different lesser stamina ourselves than professional players like Ding and Gukesh, who are playing these long matches and have trained for it extensively. You should not take good moves at the end of a game for granted, right? You could easily be blundering at the end of these games, right? So Gustafsson could just as easily be playing a move like knight e5, hanging knight takes e5, truly, as playing a brilliant move like king d4. To a certain extent, it's almost more likely that you would be playing a blunder right now rather than a good move. So a good move like this, oh man, digging deep with 4 minutes left in a classical game. This is a fantastic move. And Prabhav is, getting low on time as well. Prabhav with the better position often had, a 15 to 20 minute lead on the clock this game. Now it's down to like 7 minutes. So Gustafsson's pushing Prabhav to their own limits as well as they try to see what can they come up with here in this game. Neetham asking, is it true that I never watched Ding's last Rapid game? I didn't watch any of Ding's Rapid games with Nepo. Of course it's true. I said it. I never lie, Neetham. I sometimes joke, which I suppose could be the uncertainty. But I do never lie. There are situations in which I would lie, but they haven't come up for me yet. So I think it's very, very important. I think there's a very, very high value on honesty. So I have a pretty extreme rule on it. So yes, it's true. I never saw any of those 4 Rapid games. I saw all the other games from that match, of course. It's one of your all-time favorite chess moments as a fan of personalities and stories. Yeah, I agree. Rapid chess and these kind of things can be super exciting and thrilling and interesting from a personality perspective. Absolutely. Yeah, what can I say? But I hard agree. It could be very exciting. I just I'm so distressed by there being Rapid chess in these quote unquote world championship matches that I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't stomach it. All right, knight f4 comes in. Alex picks the pawn. And the battle continues. Now, what's the best direction to go with the knight on g5? He'd like to move it again to free this g-pawn. But b4 can also be considered for sure. At every move, b4 is an important consideration so your c-pawn stops hanging. Right? So like knight f7 would be like a good looking square for the knight, right? Check. Okay. Is that what we wanted? Maybe not. I mean, you can't discount it out of hand because it's like a big deal to move the g-pawn. If black comes at it with the king, you've got this check here undermining their remaining pawns. Very good chances that white's just drawing here, right? Just by black running out of pawns. Knight e7, taking d5, I guess. So we can't completely discount it, but I think there's a good chance that black could bring the knight back, controlling squares here that are helping the pawns advance and fight the king. This pawn gets here, and now now maybe we start advancing. But I will say there's like certainly some risk to this because this pass pawn's pretty far along. Like, look, white's got shots like knight g5. You can't take it. You know, and if you have to do like this to defend the pawn, I don't know, maybe b4. Yeah, white needs help to get to these pawns. The black king is good in this area. It might lose for white, but it can't be 100% discounted. If Gustafsson had 10 minutes instead of 5 or 4.5, I'm sure Gustafsson would have spent 2 to 3 minutes thinking about knight f7 versus b4. As it is, b4 looks like a very nice choice, keeping this pawn alive, and that keeps these pawns from getting rolling as easily. King here cuts off the best square for the knight, and in fact, the knight is almost out of squares now. Right? So that's why it's a really big deal to calculate last move between knight f7 and b4. Okay. So, most likely, you now have to sack the knight on e4 at some point, and you prepare it by advancing here, preparing b5. King f6, we're going to go takes, 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 with the idea of knight d5, b5. Takes. Now we have to be very precise. If we take, there's check. Here, takes, check. Here, we can't get in. Black just takes and wins. We can also try this move, but then maybe knight c7's winning. Probably winning. Maybe white's just lost. I don't know. There's so little time. Alex down to 2 minutes here. If king here, can we go here and just get away from the king? Maybe. Maybe the knight can just keep twirling. It's not easy for a king to trap a knight, right? Like, let's see what happened. Knight h7. Okay, he preemptively goes knight h7. So he's building an escape route with g5, knight f6. But I just want to say in this a4, king f6 line, okay, knight e4 barely didn't work. It looked really close. It's very hard for a knight to beat 2 pawns, honestly, in an endgame with this few pawns left on the board. And honestly, maybe we could draw it if our pawn were still on a3. Maybe just like this. You know, for all I know, this position here. Now your pawn's not hanging, so you just play king e5. For all I know, this could be a draw. You know, this is all they have left. You have this to distract the king. You know, maybe a4 is a blunder from me in this line here, just because black can attack the pawn. I was trying to trade one more pawn, but I didn't quite get there. Maybe in this position here where Alex played knight h7, knight takes e4 might even be enough to hold here. But the other possibility is that with a4, king f6, you could try to just keep running away from him. You guys know this game of like, oh, the knight's covering e6. Sometimes the king can't trap the knight, but here it can. You know, usually the knight, it's not easy to catch it. But here with this knight covering here, I guess you can. Knight h7, king g7. No, how did I trap the knight? I went, oh wow, a raid from the U.S. Chess, perhaps the U.S. Chess Federation? Thank you for raiding us. Well, that looks like the icon of U.S. Chess. Wow, I didn't know the U.S. Chess. I mean, it makes sense that they would stream some things, but I didn't know that they were streaming some things. Cool. Thank you for the raid. For those of you joining us, we're watching our viewers play classical games against each other. It says 2 minutes against 8, but that's because they've been playing for like 2 hours already. Okay, let me try and find this line I was just giving because I don't want to be disorienting to the people who are already watching. There's the U.S. Women's Senior Tournament right now. Cool. And Fisher Seb, you know what's going on. I don't have to tell you what's going on. We got our own viewers coming in on the raid. Okay, so what was I saying? King G7. Then on knight G5, there'd be King G6. But even this, after King G7, might not be 100% clear because there's one last move to analyze. King here, attacking the knight. The point is that on king takes, black has connected passed pawns, but white might actually win because they've got separated passed pawns when they break with b5. This might be a winning king and pawn ending for white. I don't know, and we don't have the time to figure it out, so I'm just going to clip the position for myself so I can analyze it later as a puzzle for myself. So PGN, clip the fen, and I'm going to go paste it somewhere for myself for later. Actually, I've got a special repository just for king and pawn positions. I'm going to put it there at the top as a puzzle for myself to do. After I do the puzzles, I decide whether they are good ones to use for our viewers later. Okay, and yes, there is a detail as well that after king e3, black can throw in knight to g2. And after king e2, it might give black an extra tempo that white has to take this, right? But again, it's going to be determined basically by this pawn queening. You see, I don't know if the tempo helps. But we got to get back to the game because the game is going in another direction. Knight h7 was the move. Black threw in the check. And if white comes forward, e3 probably wins. So white played king e3, black played king f7. So this knight is really boxed in by that knight on e6. This may have been a brilliant find by Prabhav, who, good thing that Prabhav had 10 minutes left, 10, 15 minutes left. Spent 4 minutes and a half finding this technical choice here. Very, very nice. All right, enjoy your game, Abject Pawn. All right, enjoy Clock Goblin. I mean, the only way I see to keep playing for white is g5, knight f6, giving up this pawn. Maybe then knight d7, knight b8 would be the last ditch thing. It's kind of a race. You would think that black could just queen while white's knight was on b8 and a6. Oh, but the knight would also threaten to go to c6, in which case it would rejoin the defense. Oh, yeah. g5 played. Good. So basically what I'm expecting, folks, is something like king g6, knight f6, knight or king takes g5. I think king takes maybe. Knight here. King here. Knight here. d4 check. King here. Sorry. King here. And now black has to just like attack and just break through with these because knight c6 is coming. It's still competitive. Prabhav is still glad to have 7 minutes instead of 7 seconds to calculate this because this is not going to be 100% obvious and clean. Look, all these moves are being played. I have to say, Gustafsson has played this endgame like 1,000 points above his rating, pretty much. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, this has been really, really excellent, high quality. Prabhav playing great as well, to be this close to winning. Wow. Well, they can both, whatever happens, they can both be very proud of this game. And also find 1 or 2 spots to improve on something. Yeah, knight takes e4 is always close. White had an option to play knight takes e4, by the way, Fisher said, with the pawn still on g4 and black's king on e7, like a ways back. White could have had this endgame here, see? This was an option for white way back at the outset, and it partly gives white king e5 coming. And I said, it's a little hard. It's hard to win endgames like this as black. I would say it's like almost rare that in just a normal 2 pawns versus knight endgame that you can win. Very, very hard. So this was like a major option for white earlier. Now, with black's king already in good position like this, knight f6, king g5, knight e4, the g-pawn's already cleaned up, so there's less chance that white would have any holding, right? Because you go here, stopping king e5, and then you bring the knight to c7, covering these squares. Probably black wins at this point with only 1 pawn. But with a pawn on g4 and a king on e5, I mean, who knows if there's anything you can do there. Okay, but let's follow the game. King f5 is played as predicted, knight b8, d4 as predicted, and here Gustafsson's thinking, I slightly preferred king d2 over king e2. It's kind of an instinct just because knight f4 could be an extra tempo on the king here. But whichever way you do it, I mean, if you go here, they can do this, and they can still hit you with knight f4 probably, right? You come here, I guess, to not give knight f4 with tempo. The knight's not immediately getting back in the defense. Like, I feel black should win, but it's basically like a mating attack of the knight and 2 pawns. The way it's possible Far Eastern is that in arenas I can't actually set a rating range. I put it in the title and I tell people where they're supposed to play. But when you create a Swiss tournament, you can actually set in the chess.com rules on the tournament where they like rating ranges and no one can enter the wrong section. In arenas, there's no actual rating ranges on the... My current Sensei eval is guessing that it's -9, that black's winning. Live position is king d2, e3. So players gotta be honest, basically, yeah. And sometimes they're dishonest, or sometimes they're just disoriented, they don't know what they're doing, or sometimes you'll have a player who wants to play 45-30 or 90-30, so they play in the wrong section on purpose because of the time control. Yeah. I mean, generally high-rated players rarely are dying for a chance to play lower-rated players, if you see what I mean. Okay, live moves coming. Check here, e2. Knight takes c6, seemingly allowing queening. This looks like a little more resilient, but black goes here, and then against this move, they come here, and now they're definitely queening. Or you can spend another tempo defending that, and then they can check and queen. Yeah, so there was no stopping the pawns here, I think. All right, looked like Prabhav managed it. So normally Far Eastern, like in general in chess, you more often than not have lower rated players asking for opportunities to play against higher rated players who are trying to avoid playing lower rated players and want to play other players who are higher than them. So you could see it as a special chance to play somebody super high rated. But yeah, I understand that it could also be unpleasant to get wailed on, so to speak. And I personally think the best chess games are played between people who are within 200 points of each other because it's super competitive and neither player feels like has that sense of a guaranteed win or guaranteed loss. I think an important component in the best chess games is not knowing if you're going to win or lose, and playing the whole game with that tension, right? Of not knowing if you're going to win or lose, knowing that any mistake could be decisive, super important. That to me is like a crux of the chess experience. So, yeah, I'm sorry that you didn't get that in your game today. By the way, if you've got a moment, what was it like to attend the World Championship live? I think you might be the only person here in the dojo who went and saw a game live. Actually, I think there were one or two other people who were actually going to travel there, so that may not be entirely accurate. You're the only person that comes to mind for me where I'm certain that they made it to the actual World Championship game. What was it like? Did you get to see the players live, or were you in a different room watching on a TV? You caught one of the decisive games? Excellent. Oh, that game 12 was perhaps the best game of the match as far as like the quality of the winning players playing it, I guess. I don't know. In terms of quality, it might have been the best decisive game. Obviously, some of the draws are going to be like nearly perfect. Are going to be more nearly perfect than the decisive games. One-way mirror and you can watch them play. Oh man, so you were truly seeing like whether they're like this. You could probably see Ding, like, was he like looking up to check Gukesh's face to look for clues, and Gukesh just impassive pretty much? Oh man, you saw it all. You saw it all. That is so cool. That is so cool. Queen e1, queen takes c6, and the atrocious rook f2. Okay, so queen takes c6 did not shock me. Rook f2 truly shocked me. Let me see if I can remember what you mean by queen e1. Queen e1. King e1. Okay, there's some game where king e1 was decisive. Give me another clue, Fisher Sub. I've been so messed up. Which game is king e1? Out of respect to the players and the great game they played, we're going to watch out the last few moves, even though once black has a full extra queen, this is not actually, this is finally not interesting after being incredibly interesting for so long. But out of respect for them, I'm gonna leave it up for the moment. Doesn't put h4, just goes king e1. Is that the Fisher Seb? Are you talking king e1, the rook and bishop versus rook and knight endgame, where Gukesh was sort of borderline between winning and drawing and eventually drew? Is that the game where you mean king e1? He played it to try and stop knight d2 and rook d2? That game? Okay. I didn't think king e1 was a bad move in that game. Do you have to wait until everyone's first game are completed? No, it doesn't have rounds, Mickelwold. It's just it pairs you with somebody when there's somebody available. Okay, so you're asking the low quality level shown, Queen E1, Queen C6, and Rook F2. Okay, so let's say Queen C6 and Rook F2. Only Rook F2 was really egregious, but even without like a specific move being cited, Fisher Seb, we could say the players seem to play at a lower level than in a lot of other World Championship matches, right? Maybe a little bit lower than the Ding Nepo match, which was already notable for being at a lower quality than other matches, right? As far as like how strong the players played, I guess. Well, we'll definitely answer that question in our podcast. Right now, let's just quickly give our appreciation and respect to Alex J. Gustafsson and Prabhav Agarwal, who just gave us one heck of a game. They kept us glued to our seats for basically 2 hours just now. Just like what, Ding and Gukesh had been doing for weeks for us. So that is incredible, fantastic. I'm sure they enjoyed it. They're probably better at chess now than they were 2 hours ago, because like going through these experiences, this is the crucible. You go through these experiences and you're just better than you were before. Super awesome game, super impressive. And Prabhav and Alex, I can tell you we've been glued to your game. So you've got about an hour and a half or 2 hours of video on demand, of tape that you can go through later and compare what you were thinking during the game with what myself and chat were thinking while being slightly more relaxed and looking over the game. I know you're back, Prabhav. We watched the whole thing. So you can you can review that if you like, and hopefully pick up some cool things there. Far Eastern is going to play 2 classical games in a row as well before then heading to a street chess event. Far Eastern is gorging on chess. Gorging. We weren't particularly relaxed either. We just didn't have the same degree of pressure that the players had there. We didn't have a horse in a race. It wasn't like we were going to live or die by the move. We were just sort of more scientifically watching it while it being an intense spectacle at the same time. Okay. So, Fisher Seb, to your question, I would say that Ding played much better than in the last year and a half, which was a favorable surprise. Perhaps a little bit less well than in the match against Nepo, but pretty close, right? Pretty close to the Nepo Ding match. I will also say the players played very, very bravely, which makes it harder to play and means more mistakes. And you can't compare accuracy between a game where players play 20 moves of theory and then play a structure that they have played 1,000 times before, with a game where players are on their own on move 7 and then don't even get a structure that they've played more than 3 or 4 times before. The difficulty level of what Ding and Gukesh did was much higher than what you see in basically any other World Championship. So when you see less accuracy, it's actually unfair to some extent to tag them for it, right? Because if other players like Magnus and Fabi didn't play 10 Berlins in a row or 10 Bishop B5, not Bishop B5, 10 Sveshnikovs in a row with Knight D5, they're playing the same structure 6-7 games in a row, the same opening, the same structure, 15 moves of theory, like all the prep of their team. If you made those guys play some like weird Reti Gambit where on move 5 they didn't know the position, you understand their accuracy would plummet as well. They would be lower on time, they would be lower on mental
resources, energy, everything, and they'd be making more mistakes along the way as well, in addition to using all that extra energy. Bonne nuit, Falgri. Glad you got 2 enjoyable games. We'll see you soon. The time usage was extreme. I see. Yeah, the time usage was a bit extreme. But, okay, yeah, so you take my point that Fabi, Nepo, and Karyakin were trying to force draws. They were also playing, like, really, like, positions that they knew. And, of course, Magnus is, a bit better, but, yeah. Yeah, Prabhav, I still play tournaments, but no, I'm not still trying for the GM title. But I am still trying to get better at chess. Does that make sense? Not not as hard as I tried when I was younger. But I enjoy still, like, studying my games and studying an endgame book and so forth. Like, when I do something, I like to do it well. I mean, when I'm slicing bread, I'm trying to slice bread better than I've ever sliced it before. And when I'm swimming laps, I'm trying to swim a little faster than I ever swam before, or with slightly better technique or something. So when I'm playing chess, yeah, I'm still trying to play well, but if you look overall at my life, I'm not doing the things that you would be doing if you're trying to become a GM or really trying to become the best you can be, right? I'm not studying 8 hours a day. I'm not, hiring coaches. I'm not traveling to the best possible tournaments, et cetera, right? I'm basically watching over my family, working like crazy to try and give my kids good emotional coaching and so forth, and reasonable material conditions to live in. And then when I've got some time and energy, trying to do a good job of providing teaching materials and good lessons through the dojo. And my own training is often an afterthought for 2 or 3 months. And then sometimes I'll train really hard for 3 or 4 weeks in a burst, do it on the stream so people can see how I train, and work reasonably hard 10 hours a week on my own chess, or 10, 15 hours a week on my own chess while doing it all in the dojo, maybe 20, 30 hours even. But when I was really training, it was 80 hours a week, and it was more intense. Did waking up early Stockholmed you? I don't know what Stockholmed means, but waking up early did ruin my health temporarily. I think it'll come back, but I felt worse basically every single day throughout the match, and by the end I was in brutally bad shape. And I understand what you say, Fisher said, wondering if he played Rook F2 as a way to give away the title because the stress had bothered him. But watching him play, didn't it seem like a mistake? I mean, I understand the like, maybe he's happier not being world champion. I could understand that question for sure. But I don't think he deliberately threw. I think he may have not been upset that he blundered and lost. He might be relieved, yeah, but I don't think he did it. I didn't see any indication that he did it on purpose, but I haven't watched the tape carefully. I'm not huge into that. By the time the game was over, I was so exhausted that it was now I'm just going to be dead for a few hours, right? I went to sleep, and then I woke up and I was like, let's stream. Let's keep the dojo going. Let's bring our attention back to the not world champions and to the real dojo. So I rushed back to that. My kids are something like 2, 6, and 10, and none of them have any real interest in chess, unfortunately. As far as Stockholm Syndrome, okay, yeah, I mean, nobody kidnapped me. I chose to do it. That's why I wasn't immediately sure you were talking about Stockholm Syndrome. Did I start loving someone who's trying to harm me? You mean myself? I was the one harming myself by doing the stream. Do I love myself? I've always loved and hated myself, and that has continued through this experience of streaming the World Championship to an hour, to a time degree that further wrecked me. Okay, let us pick another game to watch, right? Steve Nash and Smallbeak. Beautiful. This position looks interesting to me. Wow, Melt Like Butter with a quick assessment. White wins this. We see Steve Nash aiming to go into an endgame down a pawn, confident that the better structure is going to trump the extra pawn. Yeah, it's fine if they're not interested in chess. I see Fisher Seb has some love-hate relationship to chess as well. It's fine if they're into other things. It wouldn't be bad if they were into chess, you know. I could definitely guide them to play chess without it being like harmful or anything like that. Hi, Troy. I think the prep was amazing from the Gukesh team, and there is a lot of work for seconds. Yeah. So I am 18 to 20 seems like they would die, I think, if they did that for an entire month. Does 18 to 20 include like eating and going to the bathroom, or are they going to the bathroom and eating outside of the 18 to 20 and then still sleeping? I don't know if that's possible, Troy. Maybe somebody miscounted it slightly. Oh, interesting move from Smallbeak. Yeah, not making it so easy, saying, hey, if you trade, I'll take back with the pawn and defend this. I'm ready to play e6 next as well and link up a whole pawn chain here. I'm sure Rapport was not the only second for Ding, or it's unlikely that Rapport was the only. I would say it's unlikely, not impossible, because Ding did not seem as prepped as as Gukesh, surely. Yeah, Rook ED1, good call, Alex. Well, you can see how Alex is just on fire today. The brain is super warmed up. Have I ever worked as a second for anyone, and how did they reach out to me? I think I've only worked with friends, Fisher Seb. Like, I've had friends where we like help each other when one person's at a tournament or you're at a tournament, and there's not any particular reaching out. You know, we're always working together. Jesus, Troy, that's insane. Okay, but that means that between 10 a.m. and 5 a.m. they're also eating, right? So they're eating and sleeping and exercise. So they're eating and exercise and personal needs are happening during those hours. So he's saying they were having long days, but they weren't working the entire 19 hours or whatever. That may be possible. I would think 5 hours of sleep per night for that many days in a row would be pretty much a minimum. Well, I'd be happy to help you if I can, Lazy Sat. I think that I would be essentially of no use as a second in a world championship match. Notice that they don't have teams of like 50 people, because I think there's like a limit to how many people would actually be useful. Does that make sense? Like having another like 50 people rated 2400 like pumping computers apparently is not helpful, because because we see that they don't do that, right? And even a team of 3-4 people seems like a very small team. So there must be some thought that having 5 or 6 or 7 people, like at some point becomes unwieldy and not even helpful. Yeah, if I were really good with supercomputers and had a lot of experience on opening prep, Fisher Seb, it's not that a player of my rating could never be called, but specifically, you know, working with supercomputers and prepping openings is literally one of my weaknesses, right? So I would definitely be of no use. Oh, it could be something like that, Lazy Sat. Maybe a reason not to have more people is that you could have a leak. Although these guys are so honorable, I don't think it would be a factor. Folks, we just received a raid from the wonderful Grandmaster Min Le. I've given you a link where you could follow his stream. I recommend his stream. Min is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person, in addition to being a good chess player. So his mind works 1,000 times faster than mine. There's a lot of blitz and bullet on his stream, which is a bit different, but I still heartily recommend him. Just as a beautiful human being. And for those of you joining us on the raid, hi, I'm David. This is the Chess Dojo. It's a chess learning / having fun community led by 3 different chess teachers. I'm one of them, and Kostya Kavutsky and Jesse Cryer the other 2. And welcome. We are watching a viewer match. This is classical chess. Steve Nash's 20-minute workout versus Smallbeak. They're playing 90 plus 30. We've got these arenas every Friday night. And then whenever possible, teachers commenting on the games live. Zero Entropy. You've seen me on YouTube before, I guess? Cool. Okay, so we get this endgame with the good structure versus the extra pawn. The extra pawn doesn't look like it's going to last long with 2 pawns attacked at once. And then the structure is going to be really, really problematic. Really problematic. So Black has basically 2 approaches to the position that strike me. One is you try to react aggressively looking for counterplay. And the other is you try to maybe simplify off, make 1 or 2 pawn trains. Oh, thank you, Zero Entropy. That's cool. Okay, but for argument's sake, Fisher Seb, instead of having a second who works 19 hours in a day, you could have 2 seconds who work 9 hours in the day, right? Pay them each half as much. They'll both be happier, right? So there's something that's making them, like, say they really want a small team for some reason, right? Because there's no way that, good as Wojtaszek or Hari Krishna or Kamer could be, there's no way that in their 18th hour, they're as effective as like Prague would be in his 8th hour, right? So the fact that they're not splitting up that work into more people is a sure sign that there's some kind of thought there that you want to keep the group small. We're going to be ranking something else this week, Lazy Sat. We're going to be ranking top 5 greatest chess authors of all time. Karyakin is not banned from FIDE forever. I think he's already served out his ban. I think it was 1 or 2 years. I don't want to get that like grossly wrong. So to me, there were 2 main approaches to this position for Black. Rook c7 didn't really occur to me. Rook c7, I guess, is like defend everything and try and play as many moves as possible and hope that White either doesn't have enough to win or doesn't play well enough. Here were the 2 ideas I had for Black. One is e5, trying to trade a doubled pawn. Right? So I'm imagining takes, and then if I'm scared about bishop a7, maybe I have to play bishop b8 If I'm not scared about it, maybe I can go bishop g3 or something like that, or rook e8 even maybe. With the idea that here I can go rook a8 and maybe get the a2 pawn. Yeah. Oh, look, this is tricky. Like rook d7, right? And we can't break through on the a file, except we can. Oh! So, well, that was like a rare line that worked out for black. So that's one idea for me, to trade that pawn. A similar, and then there's like two ideas to try and go for counterplay, okay? One is you go rook d8. Rook d8, you're like, what? I'm hanging everything. Yeah. I have 2 pawns hanging. Now I have 3 pawns hanging, right? The theory is this. Your opponent can only take them so fast. They're all hanging anyway. Let's get active and like start attacking some of white stuff and try and trade things. White has to pick what they're taking, right? So if they go here, you know, maybe then like I check. And if they go here, I come here. Now I'm taking a2 with check. If they go here, maybe I play here and harass these pieces because I'm active. Right? Like rook here, I have maybe this move. Who knows? So anyway, so this is one idea for just trying to get active like this, right? Fischer, Seb. Well, obviously white's playing for a win no matter what I do, right? Fischer, Seb. But you're saying my bishop d4 might be refuted by throwing in the check and taking here. You play for win. Wait, don't I play for win because you hung the a pawn? See, I've gotten myself chances. I've gotten myself chances by getting active. Gotten myself some chances by being active. Rook d8 is one version of that. Here's another version that's pretty weird, and it took me a moment to notice it. Bishop h6, going after this. At first, I saw bishop h6, rook e4, and I thought, no, that's stupid. White wants to play rook e4 anyway. It defends the pawn, defends the bishop, attacks e7. And then I thought, well, maybe there's still something more here. You know, maybe there's still something like e5. I guess it's still busted. The rook's behind the passed pawn, and this queenside structure is bad. This looks losing for black, so this way doesn't work. But anyway, that's my approach to this position as black. I would like largely consider e5, getting rid of one pawn, or rook d8, just going for activity. Say, okay, let the pawns go. I really thought Lazy sat that Wei Yi would be a natural second for Ding. I really thought that he would be. I think Ni Hua was seen with him in Singapore. So that tells us that Ni Hua was another second of his. Another good Chinese player. Like a slightly lower level than Wei Yi, but he's also been about 2,700. So, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that. Okay, rook c7 was played. That's the passive approach. White cleans up a pawn. Rook f5, putting the rook as well placed as it can be. Rook a4. The a pawn looks sick. Try to trade rooks. So yeah, if white gives way, then this black rook can continue harassing. If white trades, black's structure gets better. But that is 2 connected passed pawns here, right? After rook a7. And if you trade rooks, I would guess this is dead. Just because you can't like stop 2 connected passers. There's no technical scenario where white can't push through 2 connected passers with same colored bishops. But unfortunately, if you go something like this, I guess on rook e7 there's rook a2. Yeah, okay, so you could play this move, and then you've got the d pawn coming as counterplay. Oh yeah, That is unobvious. So here we've got Steve Nash thinking about this. Yeah, this is not simple at all. Not simple for a pimple. I think I might have to let black go active to keep their structure bad. Against rook d3, maybe my king can come up and limit the damage. But you know, as black, I'm like trying to explode this stuff, right? Trying to explode it. And on this move, maybe I have... I'm hoping I have something. Oh, I have takes. Takes, check. Haha. And take the a pawn. Draw. Easy draw. So I try e5 here. We get the rook trade. Okay, this is going to be intense. Takes. Oh no, you took with the wrong piece! Oh! Now, one of the origins of blunders is when you're working really hard on complicated things 4 or 5 moves ahead. You see what I mean? Because this situation was so complicated, because white was struggling with dealing with, like, how do I handle this rook d5 move? How do I handle potential counterplay from the d pawn? Right? It's because black is posing difficult questions and white's working 6, 7 moves ahead, or in this case maybe 3 or 4, right? But that's where a blunder like this comes from. Okay? If white were just cruising, in other words, if black played like h6 or something, right, or king h8, there wouldn't be pressure on white and white wouldn't make the blunder. Does that make sense? It's the same thing with like blunders in the World Championship match, right? It's the same thing. We're all human. Some parts of it are consistent from one level to another, right? The reason you get a certain time usage from Ding and Gukesh, which the time usage has been criticized by a lot of people, including by our own Fisher Seb just now. The reason you get the time usage you get, the reason you get the blunders you get, is partly from the degree of pressure that the other people put on by playing well against you. Why white would take with the bishop rook a7 is more natural. Yeah, I don't really get it either. No vest for the jury. To be honest, bishop a7 had not even occurred to me as a legal candidate move. I had not seen the blunder coming. Because I had not even considered bishop a7. My brain wasn't giving me this a move. Yeah? So... yeah, it's definitely a surprise move. I suppose the idea was thinking that the rook is well placed, defending things. And if you go rook a7, you're no longer covering the d4 square, so the pawn could queen. Unfortunately, you're no longer covering the d4 square, even worse after your bishop gets taken. But maybe like bishop here, so the rook is still covering d4, and a2, and f4. Yeah, of course, no vest. Rook a7 overall makes more sense. Just like no vest, you know, when Ding made his mistakes with rook f4, rook f2, like before he even played rook f2, I was like, huh? Why is he bringing the rook near his king? Do you see what I mean? Like, why is he playing rook f4? The rook is best placed on the a file in the final game 14 endgame, right? So he played rook f4, and I'm like, that's weird. And then he played rook f2, and I'm like, that's even weirder, right? It's like in his own king's face, and it's opening up a route for the black king to walk down the board into the game. And only like 2 minutes later did I calculate rook f2, bishop d5, or maybe a minute later. I don't know. It felt like a year or whatever. But like the first thing was like, what is he doing? Why would you go rook f4, rook f2? Your rook's on the best square. So it's similar to you. You're like, why would you go bishop a7? Like, you just want to play rook a7, right? Trade rooks, put rooks on 7th ranks, simplify when you've got 2 winning pawns. etc. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so there you go. Anatomy of a blunder. We get a blunder. Bishop c5 played to sort of stop this b pawn from advancing, and at the same time is going to keep the white king from attacking this pawn. The game is essentially over. There's nothing to stop black from bringing the king over to the queen side. And yeah. Bishop a8, also a very weird move, Lazy Sat. Yep, 3 moves in a row that were just totally weird, right? And people can say rook f2 is a blunder, but bishop a8 was a move that I would never play. Just visually you see it and it's like, no, that wasn't on the list of moves I would ever play. Rook f4 and rook f2, all 3 in a row, were using his pieces wrong, which is the weird thing. Like, anyone can miscalculate something, but really strong players rarely use their pieces wrong, if you know what I mean. Like, you'll rarely see them running their king away from a passed pawn, right? Or putting their rook in the center of the board instead of, like, far away from a king, right? Or a bishop in a corner when it could be, you know, on g2 or f3 or b7 or c6 type of squares, right? Like, you almost never see strong players just putting their pieces in the wrong directions for strategically. So it was super, super weird. And I was really distracted and just talking and like super tired and just talking to users about other topics. But I saw bishop a8, rook f4, and I'm like, what is he doing? Those moves look so weird. Yeah, Lethal. Very, very weird. It's hard to understand what happened at the end there. It's easier to understand miscalculating rook f2, bishop d5 than to understand why on earth did he play bishop a8 or rook f4 or rook f2. Because rook f2 didn't force a rook trade. After rook f2, black could just play rook b3 or something, and white's position is worse because their rook should be on a4, not f2. Right? So it's very, very hard to understand what was going on at that point. But exactly, Fisher Seb. After rook f2, both rook b1 and rook b3 both immediately look annoying, right? Because rook f2 is on a square that your king should have available, not a square your rook should be on. It's against any like feeling or instinct or intuitive, like your hand, you're just instinct from being around chess for years. Yeah, it's really, I don't know that anyone else would have even thought of those moves that he played, much less, you know, whatever about calculating or double checking. Like, I don't think most people would think of the moves. The way in this game, I didn't think of bishop takes a7, right? It didn't occur to me. It's just off my radar. I basically think of moves like rook a7 and king f2. That's it. Like, I don't even see bishop a7. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a weird end to that fabulous match. Here comes the king. Excuse me. So this a pawn could run along on its own. The bishop would stay here, I guess. Oh, and once the pawn's on a6, you could then play b4. But the bishop just goes to b6, and it's all one diagonal. You guys know about using bishops? This idea to like use them all on one diagonal? I'm going to pretend white has like infinite time. You get to a position like this, and white plays b4. It doesn't matter because you go here. The bishop has 3 jobs. Stopping the a pawn from queening, stopping the b pawn from queening, and stopping the king from attacking our d pawn. And this is the one diagonal, I don't know about like principle or just sort of like technique or whatever. It's just how you want to use bishops in endgames. The one diagonal idea. the bishop doesn't mind doing 3 jobs if they're all on the same diagonal. Whereas if they're on different diagonals, the bishop can't do 2 jobs, right? It gets pantsed, as they say. It gets overworked if it's covering things on 2 different diagonals. But on one diagonal, a bishop can blockade 3 connected passed pawns and whatever else, and control a queening square for your own g-pawn. I doubt he was complacent in the king e5 knight c8 moment, Lazy Sat, because it was move 40 of a very tense game. And in my experience, personally, Lazy Sat, I don't know any really serious players who relax on move 40. I think almost always relaxation occurs on move 41. Or you know what I mean, like after you've made move 40. Sometimes people will then relax, and the most common mistake that they'll make from relaxing is that they'll just play the 41st move really slowly. They'll luxuriate in the 30 extra minutes that they just got, and they'll spend 15 minutes of it on the next move and then be in time trouble in the end game. But I think that moment where he played king e5 versus knight c8, I think he was still in like the tension of, trying to survive, trying to make time control. And he missed this rook h4, a4 idea or something with it. He missed something when he played it. But I don't think it was because he was relaxed. I think he just missed something, which can happen. And knight c8 wasn't like super obvious either, it's just he had 2 minutes at that point. My thoughts on Kramnik's comments. I haven't read any of Kramnik's comments or viewed any of them, so I have no thoughts on them yet, not knowing what they were, Fisher said. If you want to paraphrase something, I can give you a reaction, but bear in mind that he's a world champion and I'm not. Okay, Steve Nash gets control of the dark square with the king. Nice. Before pushing the a-pawn. And this is going to allow him to try and put this pawn on a5 and then try and play b5, b6, keeping control of those dark squares. Make it harder for the bishop to get the blockade it wants. Now, I'm thinking maybe black should calculate bishop e3. It's greedy trying to grab this pawn, but if you can grab the pawn, it makes the win so much easier. You can fully dedicate your king. The pawns can queen on their own. Like, your king and bishop can both just dedicate themselves to stopping these pawns because you're already just winning without the king or bishop. So I would definitely calculate bishop e3. And Smallbeak spent 2 minutes and did even go for it. Yeah, so they were calculating that. Thank you, Anonymous. Much appreciated. Thanks for keeping us going here. I'm also a fan of people donating anonymously. Super cool. Super cool to do. Wow, that's harsh, Fisher Seb. So apparently, YouTubers, I'm reading a quote from Fisher Seb is quoting what Kramnik said about the end of the match. And Fisher Seb said, never yet, sorry, this is supposedly Kramnik, never yet WC title, it sounds exactly like him. So I think this might be a direct quote, not even a paraphrase. Never yet WC title was decided by childish one-move blunder. No comment, period, sad, period, end of chess as we know it. Yeah, that sounds like Kramnik. That sounds a lot like Kramnik. That's rude. That's rude. But at the same time, sometimes you have to be honest. And so unfortunately, you have to say rude things about people. Like sometimes people asked me in the last year, like, does Ding have a chance against Gukesh? Can Ding play well? And I was like, sadly, if I have to assess for you, I like Ding and I feel very sad for him. But if I have to assess the level of his play at, like, some tournaments that he played in 2024, it's like he has no chance. It's like terrible. Like, I really, yeah. I mean, you could only, like, there were only sad things to say, you know, and if you feel the need to comment on stuff and be honest, it can sometimes be brutal. But it's from his Twitter account. Yeah, it sounds exactly like his written English. Why is his written English so? Why does Kramnik make no best for the jury ask such questions? As is English particularly difficult for Russians? Not all of them know best for jury. Okay, the pawn gets grabbed and the king comes over and handles the queen side. Good work by Smallbeak there, calculating it. Courtney, what's happening is the black king is going to come over and keep these pawns from queening. And then eventually these two pawns that black has will be able to queen. So black will win. It's the opposite. It's the extra bishop that's really sort of decisive in it. Yeah, Troy, we can definitely hope that the weight of the crown has something to do with Ding's difficulties, and maybe with that lifted, we could see Ding like he was literally up until his world championship match with Nepo, where he seemed to sort of like crack in some ways in front of us. Twitter added context to his comments saying Chigorin blundered mate into in the last game of the 1892 World Championship. Like a community note. That is hilarious. Kramnik got himself community noted about chess history. Ay, ay, ay. I don't know what's up with the pairing system of No Best for the Jury. Yeah, that's... I don't know. Courtney, I always want to prioritize chess questions, so I want to make sure I answered Courtney's question well enough for this position here. So basically, if these pawns go, the black king can get close enough to stop them from queening, right? Against A7, you could play bishop here, covering that pawn, and then your king can actually take this one. And against B6, you can play king C6. Now, when your king is close enough to the pawns like this, I call it when the king is embracing the pawns, but that's just my terminology. Then it freezes them, because you're both covering the square that the pawn would want to go to, but you're also attacking the pawn, so his buddy can't advance and cover b7 because you take here, right? So to me, once a king gets next to the pawn and sort of embraces it, in my speak, he's freezing the pawns and white can't do anything more, right? So now white would have to wait around. If black didn't have the bishop, this would be a draw, by the way, because the black pawns couldn't get past the white king. They could just go king e3, king d3, king e3, king d3, back and forth, and it would be a draw because black nor white could get the pawns past the opposing king. But here, because black has the extra bishop, they can go e5. White has to play a move, so they're in like Zugzwang. They could play g4 for a while, but eventually they run out of moves. They have to move the king back, and black can make progress. And again, the bishop's taking away squares from the king, along with the pawns. So white has to give ground, and black again makes progress. The bishop takes the dark squares, and the pawns gradually take the light squares. You see? And they're just advancing little by little. And eventually you can use the bishop to queen. Another technique for winning this position as black is that once king is frozen by your pawns and your king is covering their pawns, you can bring this bishop around and go and win these pawns. And then you just clean them up. If the white king ran over this way to try and stop you from taking those pawns, right? You'd have to go all this way to stop your bishop from taking the pawns. Then you can just start queening this pawn. Right? And so you see the king is torn between two different things and can't handle both jobs at all. But I can show you without the bishop. I can actually show it to you pretty easily. I can play bishop e3 for black here. and show you that without the bishop it's a draw. So you've got 2 passed pawns and 2 passed pawns. Over here we've got 4 pawns that are not passed. They can't get past each other and they don't really affect this endgame. It's kind of the same with or without those pawns. Basically, the thing to see is black can never win white's pawns because this one would queen. Right? You can come around this way. You can never take this pawn because this one will queen. But you can go back and forth like this between these 2 squares and the pawns can never queen. So it's a standoff between this king and these pawns. These 2 pawns and this king have a standoff as well. The king can go back and forth like this. And if you ever advance a pawn, then the king positions himself like the black king. And now he freezes these pawns. And if you keep advancing, you get captured. But also you can't take this because this one queens. So you'll eventually get a situation where both players' kings just have to sit and guard the opponent's 2 passed pawns. Was that a textbook explanation, or did I flub it and leave you confused? All right. So, black wins that game with the extra bishop. White tried with the pawns and resigned at this point, seeing that the black king's just going to come over. So here, white resigned. Black gets a deserved win. Well done, black. We're going to take a brief pause from game analysis to set up tomorrow's rapid tournaments. For those who don't know, Saturday mornings we generally have rapid tournaments. They've been on hiatus during the World Championship for 2 weeks. I just couldn't handle anything more than the World Championship. In fact, I couldn't even handle the World... No, I did make it to the end of the World Championship. I couldn't handle my life at the end. The last day of the World Championship, I didn't get up in the morning to make my kids breakfast. Thank goodness my partner did get up and do it because I was completely out of gas by that point. Okay, so she made the kids breakfast, Lazy said. That's what she did. Oh, did she beat me for it later? No. She just said, I know this tournament was tiring for you, but it was tiring for me too. And I was like, yeah, I understand that and I appreciate it. But I, from my side, I made a huge effort. I think I discharged like 95% of my fatherly duties, if not 96 or so, while doing the tournament. Like, I made a huge effort to not, dump on her. It was only the last day that I didn't make the kids breakfast and lunch and all that. Okay. All right, let's close this game and make a new tournament. So I have to close this for a moment. By the way, I noticed Aton of Chess with 2 out of 2 in first place in the arena, so to speak, and M. Dixion as well. Congrats to both of them on a good showing today. But of course, this tournament's really about just playing one game. It's fine. Let me close the tournament for a second because I need to make a new tournament for tomorrow. So we're going to do in club arenas, Saturday Rapid 1700 plus. We're going to make it a 3-hour arena at the normal time. 15 and 5 is the default weekend time control, though we sometimes mix it up a little bit. December 14th, Saturday, yes, at 9:30 Pacific time. Create it. Copy the link. Going to work on this for a second, folks. Sorry, I will miss chat for about 1 or 2 minutes while I do this. Let's make another tournament. Create. Club Arena. Saturday Rapid 13 to 1700. Three hours, 15.5. Put it at 9:30 a.m. Create it, copy it. And we got one more to make. Tournaments, create. Club Arena. Saturday Rapid under 1300. $15.5, 3 hours long, December 14th, 9. I often get something wrong. It's really annoying to make and remake the tournaments. So hopefully I'm getting it right. Put the link here. Now the last step is we're going to go to MooBot and set up the command for tomorrow. Saturday, December 14, 9:30 a.m. Pacific, 15 applies, open to all in 3 reading sections. Yeah. Under 1300. Um, 13 to 1700. And 1700 plus. All right. Let's see if that link works. Play. And then let's go to the club and see if it shows up properly in the Chess Dojo Club under upcoming events. Upcoming events, no events. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Did I make them for the wrong club? I can see the event, but did I set it up in the wrong club? Well, one way to check would be to start a new tournament and see by default what club it tries to do it in. Club Arena, Chess Dojo. No, that's correct. Maybe it'll show up a little bit later. Okay, I'm back, chat. I'm back. Oh yeah, the algorithm doesn't want to pair people twice in a row, I'm sure. It wants to give you a different opponent, for sure. Guten Morgen, Lumbra. Welcome. Okay. Yeah, 8 a.m. Good time. Here, it's just about bedtime for me. Yeah, Steve Nash. We caught about 10 or 20 minutes of the game before you were lost. So we didn't get the middle game. We came in when you were offering the queen trade. So we talked a little bit about the queen trade, how black should try to defend with the worst structure. Yeah. We talked a little bit about it, maybe 20 minutes or so that you can catch there. Have the matches ended, Courtney asks. I don't see anyone actively playing right now in the under. Oh no, it just wasn't showing me. There is a game here in the under 1600 section. Alyssa, Mint, Chip, and Far Eastern are playing. So yeah, it's still going. Just wasn't showing me all the games. And then Gil Johnson and Abject Pawn are also still playing here. Depending how much time you have, Steve Nash, you can do it either way. You know, if you've got a lot of time and you're going to analyze on your own, you could definitely do your analysis first and then check the VOD. Yeah. That would be the maximalist approach, so to speak, would be to analyze it yourself first, then check the VOD, and then sort of compare. Do I still play at the Mechanics? It's been a long time since I've played at the Mechanics. I've been thinking that it might be fun to just go there and hang out and play random people someday, just to play some casual chess. But yeah, I have not in a long time. I can't remember the last time I played at the Mechanics, honestly. I guess it was probably when we were playing like US Chess League or Pro Chess League, like some matches with the San Francisco team. We would go and play from the location, and I would go there and do commentary when the league got too strong for me. I would go there and do live commentary, so it was at a venue where people could come and watch. White's probably going to have to take this pawn sack since black's attacking multiple things with the pawn. This move came from d6, so it wasn't even necessary to develop. The bishop could have gone to d7 or g4. So d5 is like a super aggressive move from Abject Pawn. I asked Abject Pawn earlier today if they were a master because they were giving they had such good instincts and insight and evaluation into an endgame. And they said, no, I'm just a humble 1800 player. And look at this, they're 2146. Okay, not quite a master, but closer to being a master than a humble 1800. Well, 510, I mean, I would gladly play you as well, OTB, yeah. I have no idea when it would happen, honestly. Like, it has percolated in my head that it would be nice to go play at a tournament, but it's pretty far from happening right now. Okay, Cafe Strada is even closer. Fridays and Saturdays. Okay, like Friday nights, I always do this. This Friday night fight starting at 8 p.m. if I can. How early do you play at Strada? Pretending like a pig to eat a tiger. Maybe I should go to Strada sometime. That's even easier than taking Bart to San Francisco. Is there a pretty consistent time when people are there? By the way, it sounds like you might live in Berkeley like me, 510 Radar. And I had an experience the other day. It was extremely rare in my life. I was recognized on the street for maybe the second or third time in my life. The first time was when I was playing a chess tournament in Moscow, and a drunk guy on the street recognized me from a chess magazine. And I think it turned out that he was also an IM. He was just also like a drunk guy on the street, but also an IM, maybe. And it must have been just before the World Championship match started, so I was going to say last week, but I guess maybe 3 weeks ago. Somebody came up to me on Shattuck Avenue and said, "Hey, David, I just wanted to say hi. You know, I watch Chess Dojo." Exactly, Fisher Seb. In Russia, it looked like, you know, like a homeless drunk guy, like staggering around in the snow. But I think he was an IM. And it gives you that feeling that everybody in Russia is an IM, you know, whether or not they went and got the title. Bishop takes f7 is a shocker, huh? What? Okay. Normally you would think the bishop would go somewhere safer. But white's on fire. Six to 11. Friday and Saturday, so it's evening on both days. Wow, Craig Marr, I haven't seen in a while. Does he play there? Does anyone here know why Bishop f7 was played? I guess it's my job to explain why. I'm busy just like reading chat. Why go for Bishop f7? Versus, like, is anything bad happening if white retreats? I don't even know why black sacked the d-pawn, much less why white said, like, wow, that was so strong, I have to give up my bishop to deal with it. As far as I can tell, d5, white took the pawn, c6 doesn't even make black's position better, so black gained absolutely nothing from sacking the pawn. And then you would go bishop b3 and say thanks for the d-pawn, right? The logical move for black is bishop g4, like Francois says. And look, Francois, when I first saw this position here, this is where we joined the game, I thought maybe black played d5, sacking a pawn to play bishop g4 one move faster. That was like my first thought. But then I saw the pawn came from d6. I'm like, well, why did we sack that beautiful d pawn, anchoring our knight and blocking the d file and avoiding checks to our king, who isn't castled? Why not play bishop g4 then, right? Somewhat confusing, right? So would then sacks it, takes it, chase it. The c6, I don't know why. And I don't know why the bishop doesn't just retreat. But it comes to f7, and now knight f3. Huh. Hard to explain. On the other hand, somehow black gave 3 pawns to white, so it's not like white has to resign. It's just the moves make no sense to me. I can't even guess what they were up to. Oh, you work at AC Transit. Super cool. But then, what, you take the bus to and from Berkeley to play at Strata? No, you probably go to Strata after work. You're already in Berkeley. I bet that's how it works. But why would black want to open the d file here, right? I don't understand. d5, c6 to open the d file. Like, how does the d file benefit black? Like, their king is the badly placed one. White can probably castle queenside at some point soon. I don't know. Very mysterious game here, this one. Okay, so we get an endgame, which at least is interesting to see 3 pawns fight a bishop in an endgame. I can't explain why we're here, but since we're here, let's enjoy being here, right? We could say that about life as a whole, right? We don't know why we're here, but if we're here, let's make the best of being here. So my first thought here is that bishop g4 is a pretty important move for the bishop. It blockades the g-pawn and limits the white king's position pretty dangerously. So I would want to play g4 here to stop bishop. Okay, finally a move I understand. Finally. Now my concern with this move was that maybe rook a4 would be really good for black. And so I also considered king e2 allowing bishop g4 and then king e3 defending this pawn. So it looks like we got rook a4. And yeah, it looks pretty strong, unfortunately. Looks pretty strong, unfortunately. The e-pawn and f-pawn are both undefended. e5 check, yeah. But if the king comes back, how are we going to support these pawns? To me, king e7 and king here look good. Even king e6 may be winning. The thing that doesn't necessarily look good is here, because then f5 comes with check. So we have to go like this, attacking f4. If white defends it, you can take this one. And if white pushes it, then very important, black has check and take the pawn before it can get to e6. If this pawn gets to e6, not so obvious that black's better, right? Like if I play this king g6 move, oops. Well, maybe I can play rook g4. But you see, like, it's not obvious that this bishop is better than any pawns. Black might win now from better king position, but not because of the bishop on c8. Okay, so let's see what we get. We get e5 check. King g7. Yeah, that's where I would have gone. f5 played. Okay. Just like I thought. Used to play at Lakeshore. Oh, yeah, the donut place, yeah. Y-Bell chess, success chess, okay. Yeah. All famous Bay Area names. Hey, François. Sois un peu poli, hein. C'est pas digne contre Gukesh maintenant. Ce sont des gens normaux. Des gens normaux. Yeah, so abject pawn, of course, found rook e4. And they can play rook takes e5? What was that? Game takes a sudden turn. A dramatic turn. Aye. Worst misclick ever, huh? Merci François, c'est gentil de toi d'être gentil. Tu comprends, eux, ils jouent devant nous tous, ça peut être... on veut pas qu'ils se sentent mal, ou qu'ils ne veulent pas le faire. Pour certains joueurs, c'est impressionnant de jouer devant tout le dojo. Mastering Chess Strategy by Helston, great book. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, normally during the games they should be monotasking and not reading chat or doing other things, but there's nothing that would prevent them from doing so, and people can always go back and watch the video on demand and scroll through the chat as well, etc. So okay guys, it's late enough for me to go to bed. Happy to get Friday Night Chess back on our schedule here this week after the World Championship focus. Super turnout. Lots of people came out to play today. So, yeah. Looks like I was not the only person who was in a hurry to get back to Friday night fights. Has this game finished that we were looking at before? Alyssa Mint and Far Eastern? Not finished yet, but it looks like White is got like a powerful onslaught here with Black unable to castle. So yeah, so I'm gonna get to sleep. I hear that there's chess at Strada. I learned something about chess in Berkeley today. There's chess at Strada Fridays and Saturdays between 6 and 11. Strada is across from the university, like on Bancroft at College. Is that right? 510 Radar. Before I sign off, I want to make sure I've got this right. Is Strada is that the right location? When I was a kid, I once went to play there, or I once went to that cafe, I think, yeah, to Strada with my coach to talk about chess. And there was John Grief, former U.S. champion, reading a newspaper there. And I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing that you could just walk into a normal cafe and there would be a player of that caliber there. And they weren't playing, it wasn't like a chess gathering, by the way, 510 Radar. It wasn't like there were 30 people playing chess and John was one of them. He was just like, reading a newspaper and drinking his coffee or something. And I was like, whoa, my gosh, this is amazing. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I'm going to wish everybody good night. And with one reminder that tomorrow morning there are going to be the traditional Saturday rapid tournaments are starting up again. There's the XGlam play command for those in Twitch. For those on YouTube, I don't even know how you would find it, because now they show up under upcoming events. So it would be the same, chess club link in chess.com, right? With the chess.com/club/chess dojo would be a way to maneuver to it. Tomorrow I've got too much stuff going on with the family, so I won't be able to do commentary, but come on by and play if you want to. I'm sure from what we've seen today, there will probably be people tomorrow. Looking forward to playing. Next Friday, we'll do Friday night fights again. Next Saturday, more rapid tournaments. And next week is the last week of school for my kids before the break, so we'll try to stream up a storm and do some like viewer game reviews, stuff like that. So if you're going to be around during school hours next week, you could bring a game and ask me to look at one of your games or something like that. It's a good chance that we'll get around to that at some point next week. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to remember some streaming technique by sending a raid somewhere here.